Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon. Welcome to another episode of TechStrong TV. Today is Thursday, April 8th, and we've got a jam-packed episode for you today. Before we get things kicked off, just a quick reminder, we have a great symposium coming up in 2 weeks. It is called the Healthcon Dx Symposium. It's happening April 22nd, and it is about all things health and technology related. Lots of stuff we will be focusing on during the day-long event. DevOps and application security and user experience. So many cool things. Definitely one worth checking out, especially if you're in the healthcare space or develop for the healthcare space. Okay, so today's TechStrong TV broadcast, like I said, chock full of some great interviews. We kick things off with an interview that Alan has with Oren Toledano, who is the co-founder and CEO of Swim.io. Now, Swim enables developer teams to better understand each other's code by creating and synchronizing smart documentation on the source code itself. This is some great technology, and Alan and Oren talk about how it is so useful in the marketplace, and how it's going to disrupt the marketplace in general. Great conversation. After that, Alan speaks with Tammy Maisel-Shachar, who is the CEO of Incredibuild. Incredibuild just recently announced $140 million funding, which was led by Insight Partners. Even though Incredibuild's been around for 20 years, it's kind of become an overnight sensation. So Alan and Tammy talk about what the funding means for the company and what they're planning to do with it and the market in general. Great one. After that, Alan speaks with Asaf Ezra, who is the CEO and co-founder of Granulate. Granulate offers real-time continuous optimization, and it's a great technology that the company offers, helping organizations not only save money but improve their performance. And Granulate actually offers unprecedented workload performance with the lowest possible costs at scale. So definitely talking about optimizing performance and lowering costs. It's another technology conversation you won't want to miss. After that, we have part 2 of the two-part Haunted Hacker podcast with Mike Jones. As with part 1, which ran earlier this week, Mike speaks with Vincent Cook, who is a 17-year-old CEO and founder of the Cyber Group. It's a fascinating conversation considering Vincent's age and everything, all of his insights into cybersecurity from the teenage perspective, I guess. It's a great conversation, and definitely something. Maybe he offers up some insights that maybe we really wouldn't have thought about before. So great conversation. After that, we have our Something Old segment, which is from the recent Predict 2021 virtual summit. It is with Alex Riebert, who is the co-founder and developer of For All Secure, and he talks about increasing DevSecOps maturity level in 2021. We're talking about fuzzing and how it will increase organizational DevSecOps, safe coding languages, and the future of DevSecOps itself. So Alex explores why fuzzing will become the third pillar of testing as fundamental to quality as unit and integration testing. It's a great presentation. If you're unfamiliar with fuzzing and its role in DevSecOps, then definitely you want to check out this presentation. After that, I come back with the news headlines, as I always do. And then I speak with Alan Terletto, who is the field CTO at Redis Labs. And we talk about some of the roadblocks that developers come against when they are building mission-critical apps and the ways they can avoid those critical roadblocks. It is an eye-opening conversation, and Alan has some great advice for developers in building those mission critical apps, and we've all been doing it over the last 12 months especially, so great conversation there. After that, we have part 3 of the panel discussions on the assessment of DevOps capabilities assessment that was recently released by the DevOps Institute. It is a great document that organizations can use to assess their own internal DevOps capabilities, where they are on the spectrum, so to speak, and where they need to go. So I speak with Don White, who's a DevOps consultant, Faisal Ismail, who is the principal at Sapiens Consulting, and Niladri Chowdhury, who is the CTO of Excelentro. They are all DevOps ambassadors, and they all contributed to the creation of the DevOps assessment of DevOps capabilities document, and it is a fascinating conversation about why they did what they did, how they came to the conclusions they did, and how the assessment of DevOps capabilities document came to be. It's a great conversation. I really enjoyed having that with them. After that, I come back and I have the webinars preview, and then Mitch Ashley joins us with his Analyst Corner segment. He speaks with Jared Johnson, who is a technical evangelist at CData. They discuss some of the challenges of meeting the data needs that applications require to support digital and digital transformation initiatives. We talk about just the deluge of data that now exists in organizations, and how difficult it can be to actually kind of uncover those actionable insights that data can offer organizations. We talk about technical interfaces, including APIs, database queries, data layers, cloud services, and SaaS applications, all of which are, offer up ways to access data, but there needs to be a level of intelligence around that. So Jared and Mitch have a great conversation about that, and it's definitely another one of those interviews you want to check it out. After that, rounding things out, is The View with Vizard, which is Mike Vizard's conversation, this time with Applitools CEO Gil Sieber. They talk about how AI is shifting application testing left and right. That is a fascinating topic, and definitely another one worth checking out. Every single one of today's interviews are worth checking out. We've got a ton of great information for you on today's broadcast, and we are going to get things going right after these commercial messages. All right, kicking things off today, we've got a conversation between Alan and Oren Toledano, who is the co-founder and CEO of Swim. Swim enables developers to better understand each other's code by creating and synchronizing smart documentation on the source code itself. It's a great conversation. Let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us on another segment here for TechStrong TV. My guest this segment is Oren Toledano. Oren is the co-founder, I believe CEO, of a company called Swim, and it's swim.io, that's with 2 M's. So SWIMM.io. Oren, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you. So, Oren, you're joining us from Israel today. Is that correct?
Sure, yeah. The company is based in Tel Aviv. It has offices also in New York and Berlin, but HQ is in Tel Aviv.
All right. Well, we like to have an international, kind of guest as well as audience. So, and quite frankly, we usually do at least 2 Israeli companies in the morning, and we kind of follow the sun here at TechStrong TV. We'll do Berlin or London or Paris, or then coming to the east coast of the U.S. and eventually we make our way out west to San Francisco. So it's a regular day for us. Yep. So, Oren, we have not covered swim.io before. So if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to just kind of share with our audience, give us a little background. What's the company about? You're a co-founder, CEO. What's your background? Maybe your other co-founders. Give us a sense of what it's about.
Yeah, I'll talk a bit about the founders because it's related to the solution that we
Sure.
built. As many Israeli entrepreneurs, our background is in the IDF. We were all of us officers in the intelligence unit, technological units, 8200 for most of us, some from the Air Force. And another common factor that we have between us is that we all dealt with tech training in the Army. The Army needs to train many developers every year, and they're getting a lot of 18-year-old that have some experience in coding, but not so much. And the Army needs to train them very quickly, very efficiently, and put them on very important tasks. So the way they're doing it is by creating and executing very, very intensive courses. And when we left the Army, we wanted to create an organization that would reproduce this feeling of very, very intensive training. And before Swim, we were all part of this organization called ITC that basically was trying to rebuild this kind of experience, but for the citizen world, for companies, how to train these people. And when we decided to build Swim, we basically wanted to take all this knowledge of how do you train people very quickly on something and make it make it into a product that would be scalable. And the problem we wanted to deal with was the challenge it takes any developer that starts in a company, starts in a team, when he or she needs to understand the code base. Because we trained so many people and we saw that when they were joining a company, when they were joining a team, it was so much pain for them, right? It took many months before they were fully ramped up. And for the teams themselves, the people who are experienced in the companies, to actually train them, because the fact that you have great developers in your team doesn't mean that these developers are the best trainers, right? Doesn't mean that they have the set skills for onboarding these people the best way possible. So what Swim does is enabling people who actually know the code to build very effective and elegant tutorials and guides on the code itself. And one of the things that we dealt eventually once we built this solution was how to maintain them. How once you build the tutorial, you put the effort, even if it's not so much effort, the code is going to change all the time. Code changes every day. And you don't want to go back and make sure these tutorials are up to date, right? You want to, invest the time once and then keep it up to date. And that's part of the secret sauce of Swim is this unique algorithm that actually listens to every change, every commit in the code, and makes sure that the documentation, the tutorials, the guide that you built with Swim will stay up to date every time the code changes. And that's basically the core of what Swim does. And we like to call it continuous documentation. We look at documentation of code as a dev tool that we want to introduce, that we want to integrate inside the CI/CD process, like it happened for test, for example, in the past. And we want to solve the three major issues with that. Is first, creation of documentation. We want the CI/CD help you understand now is a good moment to document something. This PR, this commit is important or interesting. And Swim will suggest you to build documentation related to this piece of code that was just pushed. Second, the algorithm of Swim will maintain or will help you maintain it, because of the fact that we're following all the changes, we're analyzing all the changes, and we will auto-sync automatically all the changes that we think are auto-syncable. And in the third part, we're in the CI of the company, and every time the CI process is going to run, we are going to make sure that all the documentation is up to date. And if it's not, and we are not able automatically to sync the documentation, we will give a call to action to the developer that just pushed the code and tell you, when you push this piece of code, it changed something dramatic in the documentation, and you need to do like these 2 clicks in order to make sure the documentation stays up to date. And once we close this loop of creation, maintenance, enforcement, we are part of the CI/CD, and we make sure we are building very, very relevant and important knowledge on the code base that stays up to date for the current developers and for the developers to be in this team. So we're kind of like trying to kill legacy code. We don't want any piece of code in the code base not being understandable, right? We want to create this platform of sharing knowledge on the code, keeping knowledge up to date, and basically make it very, very easy for any developer to understand the code of someone else.
Absolutely. And look, in the world of developers and the DevOps and just the modern software world today, right? The average developer stays in their job 18 months, right? And like you said, no matter how good a developer they are, when you go, the world's not greenfield. When they go to their next gig, they're not starting with a blank sheet of paper. They're inheriting, what's there. And no matter how good a coder you are, there's that tribal knowledge, that, right? Not technical debt, but there's a debt of existing code that you've got to get up to speed on. And I will tell you, as an employer, because I've been there, right? Basically, you're writing off the first, if it's a really good developer, you're writing off at least 45 days, if not 90.
Oh, yes.
Get them up to speed. Right?
100%. Yes. Actually, from the last Stack it's very expensive. From the last Stack Overflow survey that they did, the answer that they got, it takes between 3 months to 9 months, depending on the company and the size of the code base. We've heard from, big organizations like banks, etc., that had a lot of legacy code, definitely many, many repositories, that sometimes a developer will spend a full 4 years and will never know the whole code base, right? So depending on the organizations, it will take between 3 months to, like, let's be optimistic, 5 months, until they're really fully ramped up. And then, as you said, they're staying less than a year. So in terms of the investment for the employers, it's kind of like crazy, right? And also it's a business risk, because all the knowledge, as you said, is tribal. So when the person leaves, they're leaving with a lot of knowledge. Right. So you have to rebuild that all the time, every time a new developer. And by the way, when we asked managers, how do they deal with that? They didn't have a good answer. The answer was, we throw them to the water and they're either sink or swim. And that's why we call the company Swim. We say swim. No, that's why, because we can't let any developers sink anymore. We need, we have the technology now to make it so easy to swim. So let's swim together.
Excellent. Good stuff. Another thing I in listening, to you describe this is, I wasn't always on this side of the camera, right? It helped co-found several software infrastructure security companies. And this was before DevOps, of course, right? And kind of the absolutely last thing that got the lowest priority, it seemed, every time, with every release, was documentation. Which in many ways is so the documentation is so important, whether it's for, in this case, new team members coming on board, users of the product, or what have you, right? The documentation is important, and it always seemed like it was the last priority that got rushed out because we were behind, date, we're behind schedule, and oh yeah, we got to do the documentation, and the person who you hired to do it, they're good people. I'm not saying, I don't want to badmouth anybody, but they weren't your crackerjack developers doing it, and they had, and they didn't understand maybe what the developers were doing. So as a result, the documentation kind of stunk, really, right?
Right.
But at least you had something.
You touched here a few important points. First, it has been overused, the term of disrupting something. But if you want to do really disrupt something, it's good to take a field that is important but is really not fun or not well executed. So we felt that the commission, as you said, is important, but everybody hates it. And also, it's kind of like competition with actually writing code. And
right.
We looked at examples that we felt were compelling, such as Snyk, for example, that dealt with secure coding for something that developers didn't have the energy or the knowledge to actually make sure their code was secured. And the way that did it was to actually lower the effort and make it part of the CI/CD, part of the workflow in the build to help the developers make sure the code is secured. So based on this, we said, okay, let's make the developer, documentation centered around the developer and help the developer build the documentation very easily. And he will be, or she will be, the best person, to make it relevant and actually that will be able to tell a real story on the code. And if we make it very easy for them to build it and to maintain it, and they feel it won't become very quickly obsolete, so we will have solved something that is critical here. And that's basically what we're trying to do.
Excellent. I love it. All right. I think we understand the product. We understand the reasons behind it. We did a good job with all this. Let's now talk a little bit. How is it packaged? How do you offer it? How is it consumed, if you will, right, for customers and so forth?
Sure. Great question. So this is a tool for teams, right? The documentation and collaboration on, knowledge management and collaboration is something that you need more than two people in order to make it relevant. So we are selling to teams, and usually the person that talks to us is the team leader or someone in the team that is in charge of this this part. And so first you can use Swim for up to 5 people, if it's a small team, for free. But above that, we sell like the first 10 and then 25, depending on the sizes of the team and the organization. And Swim is an app that is local. It's an Electron app, like you would have Spotify on your desktop. And because that's part of the security solution that we have. When Swim connects to your code base, it connects locally on the developer machine. And all what happens, the interaction between Swim and the code, happens locally on the developer's machine, meaning Swim never has access to any part of the code of our clients, meaning all the documentation that is being built with Swim stays on the repository of the clients. And it's agnostic to any operating system, any ID, any Git hosting. So it's really, really easy to deploy. It works with all the CI systems as well. So you just need to install it, takes a minute, connect your repositories that are relevant to your work, and then you can start working and you can invite people in the team. It's just like it feels like Slack, kind of like filling a team tool, right, of collaboration, and it's very easy to deploy.
Got it. Excellent. You mentioned you had offices in Berlin, New York, but is it more of a SaaS play, though, or do you download the product that you deploy on your own infrastructure?
So yeah, it's a good question. It's a SaaS. It's a software as a service, right? Obviously, with the solution that we used here, the local app is because we wanted to make the security process in the company is very easy. We didn't want to deal with compliance and security for months. And this is super secure. So that goes very fast. But you can, in the very near future, we want Swim to be fully web, a web experience. And for companies that will trust us and will go through our process and will be able to connect Swim as a GitHub app, for example, if they're using GitHub, so that they will be able to experience Swim, in their browser the same way they would use any SaaS. And it's especially and very easy for open source projects who don't care if the code is public, right? And we feel that will be a great part of our growth is being relevant for open source project, because they do need to build knowledge for the community. They do need new contributors in this open source project. And for now, it's basically the same pain. Every time a developer wants to contribute to a new open source project, they experience the same pain of what's going on in this code base, right? And for the maintainers of the open source projects, they experience the same pain of, I want to write documentation, but it's not going to stay up to date. So why should I invest time in that? I don't have time. It's already a side gig because I'm doing something else. So we want Swim to be the solution, both for maintainers and for people who are willing to contribute to open source.
So it really becomes a GitOps play, right? Because it'll live in Git, right? If you could do it in GitHub, you could do it in some of the other Git tools as well.
Yeah, all the Git hostings.
Yeah,
true.
And then, of course, when we talk about cloud native, it's most of it is open source, right? So that you should, which seems to me, it would find a ready audience there. I want to make sure our people in the audience know I said it in the beginning, but the website for the company is swim.io, right? And that's SWIMM.io, and you can check that out. Oren, I think we covered most everything. Anything else we left out?
No, I think so. It actually was great to talk to you, and thank you for having me on this interview.
It's a pleasure. You'll come back on. Keep us posted, okay?
With pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
All right. Be well, be safe. Oren Toledano, CEO, co-founder at Swim, that's SWIMM.io. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back with our next guest.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
All right, next up, Alan speaks with Tammy Maisel-Shachar, who is the CEO of Incredibuild, which just announced a $140 million round of financing. Congratulations to them. It was led by Insight Partners, and Tammy and Alan discuss what the money means for the company and for the market in general. Great conversation. Let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another TechStrong TV segment. My guest for this segment is Tammy Maisel-Shachar. Tammy is the CEO of Incredibuild. And Tammy, welcome back to TechStrong TV.
Always great to be here again. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Tammy, you and your CTO were on, I guess, a few months ago. COVID times, I lose track. Mm-hmm. But it was a few months ago, and we did like a nice little dive on Incredibuild and what was going on, some expansion. But you have some big news to announce to our audience today. But before we do, why don't we just refresh our audience a little bit about sort of who's Incredibuild and what you guys do?
Great. So Incredibuild, the company based here in Tel Aviv. actually is a company that turbocharges software development, compilations, tests, and tons of other compute-intensive workloads. We do it seamlessly by just distributing process across idle CPUs on the local network of our customers. It could be on-prem, it could be on cloud. What we basically do is we transform each compute host into a supercomputer that can have hundreds of cores and gigs of memory, of course, depending on what you have on your network or on the cloud. And we radically shorten by that compute time for a lot of different applications, from many, many hours to minutes. And that has, a huge impact on the release times, which is pretty much I would say, the challenge of this century, how to get as quickly as we can out to the market without compromising on quality or cost. So the
Absolutely.
company here, and we're about 100 people. So, we're growing and enjoying, I would say, the winds of COVID, which, were tough from others, but I think in software kept on making this a very strong market.
Yeah, well, the whole move to digital transformation and so forth has been and none of us, in that, it's not just the software, it's companies like mine that are involved in this industry as well. I mean, no one wants to jump up and shout about it because there's so much suffering in the world. But the fact is, we've all been very busy during this past year. And now, as we look towards, God willing, the end, we put this COVID in our rearview mirror, more vaccines, being administered, and we lessen the threat. We look going forward, right? And we're not going to go back to what it was before. We'll build on what we built this year. And so I'm really excited by what the future, near term and future holds. And frankly, one of those things is look, there's been a ton of investment money, PE money, VC money, private money, even people's money on sidelines waiting to see how this comes out. And now we're in a place where there's a lot of money to invest. There's government, the governments have been spending money as well, investing in stuff. And it's an exciting time. It's sort of roaring 20s, if you will, right? We had the roaring 20s here in America in the 1920s, and we could have a roaring 20s in the 2020s. And Incredibuild's been part of that. So why don't, that was my lead into your news. So give us the news, Tavi.
I couldn't agree. And maybe a minute before the news, I think, again, that COVID was basically accelerating processes that started before in the software industry. I think the digital transformation, everybody was talking about cloud for so many years. And I think, production maybe, but dev moving to the cloud took time. And I think COVID gave that a push. And I think this was one of the things that made Incredibuild successful last year, because the ability on the cloud, not only to do things more efficient and in shorter times, but also saving money in the same time by being, having the ability to take smaller machines, cheaper machines in more instances, I think made it more attractive. And so what we announced last week was that Insight was investing around $140 million, which includes both primary and secondary, into Incredibuild, and they're joining our current owners, Fortissimo, private equity company. Now, the great thing about this is that, Incredibuild has been profitable since day one. We are a bootstrap company, and we didn't go and look for investments because, our need to support ourselves. I think that the growth the company enjoyed last year gave us the understanding that there is a window that we need to take advantage in terms of accelerating our own growth and are being able to take, a lot more use cases of what we accelerate. If today we accelerate build and compilation and some sorts of testing and packaging and signing, how can we take it further? How can we take this great engine and make it more valuable for our current customers, but also open up new markets? How can we invest in the US market? The US market has been huge for us, but everything was done from our Tel Aviv office. Now you and I are sitting together. You see it's dark on my side, it's still light on your side. So there is a huge difference. So having the presence in the US is part of, a lot of the investment that we plan. So there is a lot of plans. And I think the fact that Insight, which is really, has a huge portfolio of more than 200 companies, especially in the DevOps and in the software area, there is a lot to benefit from their experience. And I think that, they look at the potential of Incredible and think that, we have a lot of what to do together.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, look, that's an astounding amount of money, and congratulations, as they say on this. But I also want to make something clear to our audience out there. So many people, they see someone like you sitting here on the interview with me, and they say, wow, she really got lucky. She did a startup, and they raised $100 million, right? And well, I'd like to do that. Can you imagine doing a startup? But, in your case, this isn't an overnight success. I forgot. I thought you were more than 7 years. How old is Incredible now? How long have you been at it?
20 years. Almost close. I mean, it's 2002. So it's a very long time. And I think, we've had an amazing transition. And, I think the idea was that the product from day one was something that the market needed. And the founders really thought that it was a great solution for developers, not to have waiting times. But they didn't imagine that this could turn into a huge business in terms of the total addressable market and what can be done. And only 2 years ago, after this company was spotted by Fortissimo and they asked me to join, we said, wow, this is like a diamond in the rough. You see amazing logos from Microsoft to Adobe and Garmin and Epic and other and many different customers. And it's a very reactive company, great technology. And this is when we kind of turned the company into a proactive approach, enlarging the use cases, starting to talk to our customers, understanding their needs. And I think that kind of pushed us to where we are today. And it's a lot of work. It's not an overnight success at all.
Right.
It shows that resilience and, sometimes patience, business models, and always trying to figure out new ways to do things kind of opens up new windows of opportunity.
Absolutely. So you mentioned expanding to the U.S. I'm trying to think back because it is a few months. I thought you had like an office or two in the U.S. prior.
Nope, we had an office in Tokyo, small office in Tokyo, and small office in China because of the gaming industry. We're very strong in AAA gaming. And all of our US activity was done from Tel Aviv. So we hired our first 2 US employees in New York area.
Congratulations. So you're going to be in New York.
I'm not sure, by the way. If you have some good ideas, let me know. People are saying Austin, Texas is the great place, and maybe
Austin, Texas is great. So I live in Boca Raton, Florida, and I'll make a quick pitch. Bank just opened a $100 million fund here. It's a very inexpensive place to work, but it's not Austin, in all honesty. New York is expensive, but it is, and I'm a New Yorker. I'm born and bred there. It's a great place. It's not cheap.
Again, is that COVID taught us that it doesn't matter where you are.
It really doesn't. Yeah, I mean, people are coming down here. We have great weather. We don't have income tax, but Texas Austin gets too hot. But Texas also is very affordable. Look, there's a ton of Israeli companies who have made this move, right? And Boston, San Francisco, Austin, all over. I'm sure you'll find.
Exactly. The idea is to be, first of all, in the time zones of our customers and speak their language in a clear way and be there to support them, not only in sales, but after that, in customer success, in technical support, anything which is needed. to make it at the end. You asked, what is for our customers? This is exactly that. We want to make sure they have the best experience, that they make most of our technology and have the ability to do it in their own hours and not have to wake up really early or stay very late in order to talk to us.
Absolutely, and that's a great thing to do. So beyond expanding in the U.S. in a full expansion, not, as you say, not just sales, what are some of the other things that this capital will enable you to do in Incredibuild?
So I think most of it is productization of more use cases. When we see our current customers in the future market, we know that acceleration is the key to stay competitive. Everybody talks about fast, but at the end of the day, actually taking something which is 10 hours and making it 1 hour, or something which is 40 minutes and making it 2 minutes is crazy important, especially for processes which occur many times during the development process. So it's building compilation, testing in all forms and kinds. So packaging, signing, all of that. Now, in order for us to be able to productize all of these in a parallel way and move towards AI, which we're looking at to see how we can accelerate machine learning, for example, or training in AI, we need to be able to recruit a lot of R&D people, a lot of product people, and be able to work in parallel and not, in a different way, because that's the way we can really achieve more value for our customers. And we're also looking at additional technology, not just the virtualization and parallelization, which is how we do the acceleration today, but look into additional technologies that will improve performance. And the idea is to make sure that we're the accelerator in the market. It doesn't matter in which industry. They could come to Incredibuild and find the right way, how to accelerate the different processes. It doesn't matter if it's Windows, if it's Linux, hopefully to support Mac soon. It doesn't matter which part of the processes. We're talking, as I said, for example, graphical things like rendering and shading, which a lot of our customers feel this is, again, a very CPU intensive and time consuming process. So I think this is where most of our funding is going to go. Plus, as I said, geographical expansion and marketing, which is always something important to do. Because I think, a lot of people do not know yet Incredibuild.
No, not it. I agree. Yeah. You do. I mean, the first time we did our interview a few months ago was really the first time I had heard of the company. I've stayed on top of it since then, and then I work a lot with the Insight folks, so I was happy to see that. But yes, you got to get the word out there with a bunch of stuff. Important. So Tammy, but nevertheless, look, another lesson we've learned in COVID is you got to know the on-off switch. You got to have work-life balance. So there comes times where you want to stop and smell the flowers and say, hey, you know what? I accomplished something. This was and this raising this kind of money and what it means for the company is an accomplishment to be proud of, and it's a good time to take a deep breath, right, and say, okay, now I'm ready to go forward. But congratulations. I mean, it's great. It's great for you as the CEO, right, to be leading this charge, and it's something to be proud of. So congratulations again. But you only get a little bit of a time to smell the flowers.
That's what I said.
Now we want to know what's next.
Exactly. Right? I think, first of all, it's time to always celebrate and thank the team in Incredibuild and, our customers, which always are the one pushing us forward, because they come to us and say, we want to, do more. So I think, we have all of those, and we are very busy continuing to grow. So stay tuned on that. I think there is a lot of more that we can contribute and help our customers and our future customers.
Fantastic. All right. You know what? Website, Incredibuild.com?
Completely, Incredibuild.com. You can find everything about our different products and a lot of open positions, by the way, so this is the time.
All righty. Tammy Mazel Shaker here on TechStrong TV. We're going to take a break, and we're going to be right back with our next guest.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more. ContainerJournal.com is operated by MediaOps Inc., the team behind DevOps.com, Digital Anarchist, SecurityBoulevard.com, DevOps Connect, and DevOpsDozen.com.
All right, next up, we've got a conversation between Alan and Asaf Ezra, who is the CEO and co-founder of Granulate. Granulate provides unprecedented workload performance with the lowest possible costs at scale. It's an interesting technology, and it's a great conversation. Let's get to it now.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us on another segment here for TechStrong TV. My guest this segment is Asaf Ezra. Asaf is the CEO, co-founder of a company called Granulate, and he's going to tell us all about it. Asaf, welcome to TechStrong TV.
Hey, Alan. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you on. We always like to hear about new companies and new technologies and new ways people are doing things. So, Asaf, we really haven't covered Granulate here at TechStrong, DevOps, or Security Boulevard. Why don't we start with that? What's Granulate about? You're one of the co-founders. How did you and your co-founders, come to find it? What's your background?
So actually, my co-founder Tal and I go really way back, so around 14 years now. We joined the IDF together, and we did a 40-month program and then a 6-year-long service on top of that. When we were discharged, we came out of one of the intelligence units, and we thought we were going to do something in cybersecurity. We joined YL Ventures as entrepreneurs in residence. They're a cybersecurity-focused venture.
I know you well.
Yep. And they helped us a lot doing customer interviews and market research. And what we actually found was very surprising. So we've seen that out of around 30 companies that we talked to, let's say 28 odd, we're running anywhere between 10 to 40% utilization. And the truth is, when we saw that, we said, look, that's super surprising. Because, in the cloud and microservice-based architectures today, you can scale in and out, and you don't have to scale your entire monolith. You can scale just one service if it's becoming a bottleneck. So for us, this was a very huge surprise. And naively, we started working with a couple of these companies just to say, okay, so you're running at 20% utilization. Let's cut your cluster in half. What will that do? And while mathematically that would put them at around 40% utilization, the truth is they were a little over that, and they were experiencing a lot of performance degradation, latency spikes, and the technological challenge of understanding why it happened and the fact that it was so widespread drove us to actually started solving that.
It's interesting because I'm a little older than you, obviously, and I was always taught that you never want to be over 40% utilization, right? For exactly that reason, because you might spike up to twice that, to 80, and anytime you're over 80, man, you're looking for trouble, right? I remember my first web hosting company, I started in the mid-90s. We were running Sun Solaris Spark 2 servers, running Solaris with Netscape server on them. And that was one of the things we used to watch religiously was, what was our CPU, what was our utilization of resources. And optimally, we like to stay around 30% because that was best practices, right? If you ran around 30, you spike 60, you're fine. If you were spiking 75, 80, you needed to add more resources to it. So, I mean, I guess what you were proposing, though it doesn't seem radical the way you described it, it's a departure from kind of best practices, and as you said, it resulted in some degradation. So how did you solve this?
So what you said is actually true, especially in the on-premises world where you don't have.
Well, that was my world then.
In the cloud, we tend to count on the cloud providers to have the excess capacity that we need when we need it, and if we build the rules right, we can scale in and out before we're hitting those throttling areas where you might encounter all these spikes. And the truth is, when we started digging into it, we realized there were issues all over the place. So we actually started, or where we are now is basically the lowest levels of the kernel, which was, if you look back historically, it was built for a user behind the keyboard in mind. So it's very efficient at interactivity and fairness. So right now I'm talking to you over Zoom and I can do multiple other things. Everything would run very smoothly. But in production environment, we have a very unique set of circumstances that's a little different. So we don't have to have that sort of general purpose, all around good conditions, because we are searching for different, what we call optimization function. You're following latency, throughput, IOPS, queries per second, if we're talking about databases, while you have a specific function that you want to optimize. In your own application, you don't change it every second. So if I asked you to create a graph of how the processing stages look, you might have been able to do that. Granted, for different data and different queries, some different processes would happen. Just as a quick example, if both you and I log into Netflix and I've never been on Netflix, they're not going to find anything in my history, so they're not going to recommend me anything based on my history. So it's going to be a little different for everyone, but the majority is going to go through the same processes. And once you have a repetitive pattern and an optimization function, you can try and optimize for that specific pattern. And this is basically how Granulate does that.
Excellent. So I'm trying to think. I saw a company that they had an algorithm that would like run a scan basically, or in a test environment, your cloud-based applications, and then optimize. Right, cloud optimization is what they called it, and it would saving ridiculous amounts. Now, of course, two tenets of the cloud were elasticity and burstability. Right, that was one of the two big reasons to move to the cloud. But my experience is, look, you set up an instance and you tell it how much, what's the maximum CPU, what's the maximum storage, what's the maximum memory, and I don't know how much elasticity and burstability you have there, because I don't know how much people really test to know exactly what they need, pre deployment, right? It's kind of like learn as you go, which is probably not the best way of doing it. So how does Granulate help there?
So the truth is, Granulate is actually agent-based, and when you install on your machine, we actively change the way that resources are allocated. One of the benefits of doing that is that we also understand how much capacity, or at least how much capacity we think that the machine can hold any longer. And so we give you insights into how or what your scaling and out thresholds should be. Because now all of a sudden, you may be able to scale out at 65%, 70%, 95%. We have some customers that we were able to reach with no performance degradation. And so all of a sudden, you have something that's a little more, let's say, battle tested and a little more proven when you try to mess around with those scaling and out thresholds, which, if done wrong, can cause outages. So this is a good reason not to play around with those if you don't have the measurements.
I got it. So does this work only on AWS? Does it work on multiple clouds? What's the story?
It would work on any Linux machine. We have customers ranging from bare metal on-premises and all the way to multi and hybrid cloud environments. And the idea is to boost your single VM as much as you can, or your single instance, if you're talking about bare metal. And then from that, extrapolate for the rest of the service, or start deploying gradually from one machine to 10 to 100 and so on.
What about Kubernetes and cloud native architecture?
So with Kubernetes, things get more interesting because it adds a whole nother layer of sort of requests and limits that you have to specify. And I don't know what about you, but when I was younger and wrote code, I never had to specify what amount of CPU my code requires.
Right.
I could barely calculate at that time what amount of memory it would require. And so all of a sudden, we're actually required to do so, because this is how you determine the container or the pod. And so we found that Granulate can actually help you do that as well. So instead of having another abstraction layer that you have to struggle with, because now you have your pod requires and limits, your horizontal pod autoscaler, your vertical pod autoscaler, and you have your cluster autoscaler. So you have too many things that you need to look out for. And so luckily enough, Granulate was built in a way that operates on a per process basis. So even if you have multiple pods on the same machine, we can fixate on each one of those at any given point in time, help you set those requirements, help you set those horizontal pod autoscaler. Of course, after we've actually helped you gain some more of the performance improvements, so we can tell you a little bit better and based on our actual measurements, what we believe that you should do.
Excellent. So the agent runs on the instance, right? Is that where the kind of brain is as well, or is this going back somewhere else for the analysis and for the recommendation and getting it done?
So it actually splits into two. When it comes to a single machine, each agent is on its own, because you don't have the luxury of time that it would take to travel to the backend and go back. However, in cluster level, let's say cluster level strategies, when we talk about Kubernetes services, or we talk about big data analytics, when each job can be scheduled at different machines every time, then you need to understand your strategy for that specific job, or your strategy for the specific containers and pods. And so that one happens in the backend. It's aggregated over time and over multiple machines to allow you to gain better performance improvements. And sometimes we find that one thing that worked really well for one customer wouldn't work for some other customer, because they're utilizing the same tech stack. Could be a Spark job here and a Spark job there, but they just written it a little differently. So it's not necessarily going to work between them. And sometimes with, let's say, Kafka streaming, for example, you can find that it's very similar across multiple organizations. So you gain more from having that information.
Interesting. So how do you offer, how's this packaged? How's it sold?
So each agent can be installed manually through a command line if you want, but obviously today's world, we have multiple deployment systems. You have your own way of deploying your own machine. So this could be part of the AMI. This could be Kubernetes daemon set, Ansible script, Chef script, AWS user data, Terraform, CloudFormation. I think one thing that we're seeing really well these days is that deployment to a production system is done really well and very automated in most organizations.
Got it. And pricing on this sort of service, Asaf?
So the pricing is on a per core per hour basis, very similar to the cloud providers, because we believe that the effective benefit is sort of a increase in CPU frequency. If I had to venture a guess of what would be the equivalent of not having granulate and doing it with hardware.
Excellent. All right. I think we've got a nice deep dive there. What's new with the company now? Like, what stage is the company at? Go to market and stuff like that.
So we raised our Series B at the end of December of last year. We are expanding very rapidly. We have offices in London, New York, and Israel. And we're looking to expand those to about 2 times what we are now, about 3 times what we were at the end of December. And we're building out our strategic alliances with both APMs and the cloud providers. And we're hoping to get some good news out there very soon around those partnerships. And I think if something we've seen during the COVID era is that it can actually help companies not only cut costs, but where it actually hurts, which is their margins. And we've seen it very well in the public markets, where you can increase the margins by 2 to 3% and increase your market cap by quite a bit. So for a lot of companies, this means a lot, not just because they need to cut costs, but also because they want to show their shareholders that they're doing everything they can to increase those margins.
Absolutely. And also with the move with digital transformation and the move, more cloud adoption, there's a lot of people, they're putting stuff up there, but they don't have the experience. They don't have the depth to say, okay, this is not truly optimized, or it is optimized, or what have you. So I think that's, it's a good time to be doing this right now, right? With the rush to the cloud. So congratulations. You know what we didn't tell people, Asaf? What's the website?
Our website?
Yeah.
Granulate.io.
Can you spell that for us?
GRANULATE.io.
Perfect. All right, Asaf, we're about out of time. I wish you a lot of luck with Granulate. Come when you said you're going to have some news soon, we're going to hold you to it. Come back and tell us about it, okay?
Yeah, that'll be in 1 week. So I'm happy to come back.
All right, you'll be back. We'll
Thank you very
see you
much.
soon.
Thank you. Asaf Ezra, CEO, co-founder at Granulate.io here on TechStrong TV. We're going to take a break and we'll be right back with another segment.
All right, next up, we've got part 2 of a 2-part conversation on the Haunted Hacker podcast. Mike Jones speaks with a 17-year-old CEO and co-founder of Cyber Group. His name is Vincent Cook, and he's got a lot of great things to say, so let's get to it.
So let's talk more about threat intelligence. I'm sure Alton and Mike has more technical questions to ask, but kind of give me an overview of what are some interesting things that you're seeing in terms of threat intelligence that you guys are monitoring?
Yeah, 100%. So at the moment, it's a lot of ransomware attacks, which is, the I would say the standard at the moment for our clients. obviously we have access to the dark web and all of that, crazy data, and can translate across multiple languages and all of that good stuff. But it really does depend on the clients, because we're not doing it for an entire sector. It's more based around a particular client at a given time. So if we're monitoring one of our MSPs, funny enough, and they've got access to a law firm, they were hit by, I believe it was Revel ransomware. Their data was sold on the Happy blog, and that was the whole process of finding that information, looking at the Megas NZ links, getting that taken down, and following that whole sort of process of that mitigation. So it really does depend in terms of what we're seeing in the threat intel. I know I've spoken to people recently, some interesting people within the finance sector. And they're, really obviously focusing on the threat actors that are hitting those sectors and so on, right? So they look at it from that broad perspective. I would say we're more narrowed down on what's hitting that client. But also in the future, we are looking at bringing in threat context, which looks at all the threat actors out there, what markets they're hitting. So, for example, if our client is in the financial sector, we effectively tailor news and threat actors to them. We look at what threat vectors they're using, and then effectively tell them in advance, okay, look, we're seeing a lot of these threat actors using phishing attempts, and the emails look like this. We give them that information, and then off and away they go. They remediate, they turn up the anti-spam or whatever, right? And they put notices out. So we've got it's more of a vision at the moment, what we're trying to do on a broad scale and look at threat intelligence as a whole. But at the moment, it's very niche to one client.
Gotcha. So how do you kind of keep the data? How do you protect your company's data from these threats, since you guys are monitoring it?
Yeah, it's interesting, and we've had a lot of conversations with law enforcement. We work with some law enforcement, and their whole discussion is around, okay, where's your data, where it's being hosted, who's supplying the data, and when it comes to OSINT, some of you may know, but tool used by and created by the Russians. Obviously, that poses some issues and some concerns. So all these different things around the technology, we have to vet that when it comes to who we're working with and where they're at. And you'll see a lot of the Russian tools are registered in, the Netherlands or Germany or somewhere like that, right? Which is quite interesting. But that sort of supply chain is they're all in Moscow, right? So so we're obviously looking at that and the feeds that we're bringing in. We obviously are in, the cloud, AWS, protecting that, pen testing all the time. We're looking at getting cyber essentials and all those, necessary compliances, if you like. So that's how we're doing it at the minute. But obviously we will have more processes and more sort of compliance that we have to meet as we move along with law enforcement and also companies.
Gotcha.
Pretty cool. Yeah. So doing threat intelligence, one of the things that I found really interesting, when you dive into what CrowdStrike does a lot of geopolitical, they do a lot of internet, they do a lot of technology intelligence, right? So they have something really cool where they've taken all the different nation state groups and hacking groups and turned them into these cartoon characters. Which made it totally digestible for all the geeks and in IT or whatever looking at buying the product. But I think it's the most important thing. I talked to somebody earlier last week over in Europe about what I see the biggest pain points are, and I think what people are seeing now is that they're realizing just how much infrastructure they truly have during the pandemic. Because when that infrastructure is separated between the workers and the actual operations, they're actually starting to see that there's more to their network than they actually thought to begin with. Mm-hmm. And without any kind of actionable threat intelligence, let's say you don't have, you don't know the tool set that they use, or the banking Trojans using Bank of America or, some of the larger banking institutions have their own threat intelligence. What they do is they break it down to infrastructure and geopolitical groups, right? And so they list out all different groups and their technology and what verticals they try to hit. Are you guys looking to build something like that out to where you have like human assets to dig that information from the dark web and from those different groups?
Yeah, 100%. I think it's important to note that the way our platform works is that we have a back-end portal, if you like, where the analyst sits, and then a front-end portal that we've actually called, again, a new name, Reportal, which is a report-based portal. Again, just a quirky name, why not bring something new? So we're looking at the analyst in the back end has the ability to do those real-time searches into the dark web, do those investigations. They can search in, social media and data leakage from, Elasticsearch or AWS, whatever, right? And they can pull all that data in a nice graph fashion effectively in the platform. And what's really nice is that enables us to filter that information before we pass it to the client. So we're only passing the client actionable intelligence that they only need to see what's going on now in their environment. We don't want to show them leaked credentials from 5 years ago. It's just not, so we want to, with the analysts in the back end, we are looking to then start to, as you said, sort of gather our own data and our own sort of analysis on the threat landscape within the dark web, for example. So that's something we're looking to get to in the future, 100%.
Yeah, that's.
So is the analyst a person, or are you guys using AI for that role?
So when it comes to threat intelligence and open source intelligence and counterintelligence, right? I'm a firm believer. I mean, I like AI, but I'm a firm believer there still needs to be people behind it 100% at the minute. It's just not good enough for AI to make those connections. So we have a person sitting behind the platform that can manage up to X number of organizations in one go. Now, in terms of alerts, if an analyst is down, for example, alerts go straight through depending on their, critical sort of level and severity level. But the analyst is there for those investigations. So when our clients sign up, that yes, they get the 24/7 monitoring, but they also get X number of hours of investigations on the back of those alerts that are coming through. So, for example, if a threat actor has just mentioned them in the dark web, saying that X, we're looking to attack this on whatever, right, on this IP, we would obviously pick that up and we would then have our analysts go into the dark web, do those investigations on that alias, look at, are they connected to any other accounts, PGP, Bitcoin address, you name it, right? It then branches out as a spider web. And that's what we're looking to achieve when we get the platform and the MVP up and running, which is about 10 weeks out now. That's what we're really looking to hit there.
Nice.
Awesome.
Do you partner with any cybersecurity companies or mostly MSPs, or who's your, ideal partner?
Yeah, so we partner at the moment because we're so young. I mean, we're only 6-7 months old. It's very, let's have conversations and let's see where it goes, right? It's not, a strict company guidelines to this. We're very open to conversations with anybody. I mean, to give you, an idea, we've got partners that are just delivering sort of ATO services, account takeover services with credential monitoring. And those guys are, ex-Secret Service out in the States. We've got partners that have access to a huge network of high net worth individuals, 2 separate partners, one in UAE and GCC, as well as in the States. We've got a cybersecurity partner in New York, an IT provider, so not even somebody in cyber, an IT provider in the UK. It really does range. It really does range in who we want to, work with. And again, that all just comes down to a conversation if we see, business effectively.
Are you actively reaching out to these businesses that are currently your partners, or was it through connections or your networking, or was that some of your networking, coming in and benefiting? So kind of tell me how you did that, because I know that's always a big challenge for companies, especially new ones, and especially one with a very young founder, right? It's I feel like cybersecurity is one of those industries where you've got to build trust, right? So So how do you kind of have that connection, and where how did you start from 0 customers to kind of where you are now?
Yeah, and I think I've got, I had a small network, right, and I knew people, but I think I've got to give a lot of credit to Tanesh here. This is where Tanesh comes in as the head and shoulders and the experience. And again, I fully embrace that. It's awesome having somebody that I can turn around to, ask those questions that I'm struggling with and have that, that advice. And again, it's lovely because we're business partners, we're friends, and also a mentor, right? So his network is huge, and we've tapped into that. But again, not even all of it. We don't want to fall over. That's a key thing. We don't want to, reach out to all these people and fall over. One thing I would say as well is that a lot of our business has come from referrals. So we've not even picked up the phone or an email yet out to try and sell our service, which has been pretty awesome. It's all done through word of mouth at the moment. And we are obviously looking to, get salespeople on and, channel and managers and all of that good stuff. But a lot of it is through word of mouth in who we're dealing with. Some of them have come from me out in the States. A few of them were my contacts. Again, a lot of it's come from Tanesh's network, but it's just about building that relationship with them and building that trust. This will make you laugh. One of our partners in the States, some of the guys under the company, they don't know how old I am. And one of the guys there, bless him, he thinks I've got, kids and, married. And he actually said that
You're like, I don't even have my license yet.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So he thinks I'm older than Tanesh, got kids, married, being there, done it. So I don't know if you'll see this on LinkedIn or whatever, but it'll be a nice surprise. But I mean, I was working with them since I just turned 16 as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just about building those relationships and word of mouth. I think is so key. Networking is
absolutely.
And the community is so small too. I remember when I first talked to Tanesh about the company. He says, "Oh yeah, we've got this guy that works for us, and he's a young kid, and his name is Vincent." And I was like, "Wait a minute, I know that name." He said, "You know Vincent Cook?" And I said, "Of course I know Vincent Cook, absolutely." And that's when Tanesh said, "Yeah, he's with the company. That's say no more. Whatever you guys need, just let me know." So that's how I got brought into that group of people. Really great group of people too. When I looked at the people on the board and the ambassadors, like some of the names that they had was pretty amazing. Like I think a good majority of them have been keynote speakers at some point or still are. So given your background, Vincent, and everything you've done, if there's one thing you could have changed so far, and believe me, there'll be a few, I'm sure, come down the road because, you're starting out at such a young age, the things that you look back and go, man, I really wish I could have done that differently. Is there anything you've done so far that you wish you could have gone back to change or make different?
It's an interesting question because, as I said at the start, I'm a very firm believer in the universe. And I always think, I always say that the universe has got three answers: not yet, maybe, or yes, and that's sort of stuck with me throughout what I'm doing. And I've never really regretted any decision I've made, even if it's not the best one I've ever made. I've always thought, okay, it's happened now, let's move on. We've learned from it. And it's always been, okay, I wouldn't have been here if I hadn't have done that, or I wouldn't have learned this if I hadn't have done that. So yes, I've made lots of mistakes, but I don't think I regret or would change any of them, if I'm going to be honest with you. If I was to give you an answer, it'd be, learn to save money a little bit more. And some of the things I've spent money on, maybe not. But in terms of, from a business perspective, I don't think I regret anything. I've made mistakes, 100%. We all make mistakes, but I wouldn't say I regret any decision I've made.
Yeah, I think that's key. I think knowing that you're going to make mistakes is the foundational key, but learning from those mistakes and moving past it is another thing. There's tons of things within cybersecurity that are new to me. Podcasting, I never would have thought I would have been doing a podcast. If you'd asked me, the day that we met at Vauxhall, if I'd have a podcast, I'd tell you, no, it never happens. But here I am doing a podcast with you guys. So, I mean, it's weird how different choices we make early on in our careers in cybersecurity kind of determine who you become later on down the road. And it's really cool to see some of the people that I've hired, years ago and look at where they're at now. There was one girl that I brought into an oil and gas company, and she was just a SOC analyst. I was building a SOC, and now she runs one for another company. It's just little things like that is really cool going through your career, like looking back and seeing the people that you've worked with and the people you've, brought products to market with, and, what it's done for them and where they're at now.
I was just going to say, and add to that, definitely learning from your mistakes is one, and going back to having that network and people around you to learn from. Who said you have to learn from your own mistakes, right? Having that network there and that, circle of friends and whatever, you can pick up what everybody else is doing and learn from them and learn from their mistakes as well. That's also key.
Yeah, that's definitely key. Although I tend to make stupid pet trick mistakes where I keep making the same mistake over and over again. Yeah. So Ryan, I'm sure you have some questions. You've been texting me and we've been talking about it. So
Vincent, what do you think the main difference is between the practitioner mindset and the entrepreneurial mindset? What was the biggest challenge you faced going from, the business side?
No, that's an awesome question, actually, because I've often thought about this myself, is that, I love the fact that I have, I would like to think I have a balance between a practitioner and knowing my stuff effectively and the business and being able to talk to people. And Tanesha said that as well with me, that, I just have the ability to speak to people and be myself and be upfront about it. But, have that practitioner knowledge behind me to then back up everything that I'm saying. So it's a really interesting question. And I, if I'm being brutally honest, I love the business and entrepreneurial side of things. I think that's amazing, connecting with different people and, understanding how things work in that sense and how people operate is awesome. But and I would say that's the main difference in terms of, there's a slight shift, if you like, 51% towards, business and entrepreneurial. But I'm definitely on top of things when it comes to a practitioner sense. I mean, we're still a very small company, right? And I'm the one delivering most of the time. We have two other analysts, but I'm the one sort of overseeing and delivering on most of those projects. So I have to, keep in the loop, and there's some interesting things coming out soon that will help people to keep in the loop around intelligence that we're working on. But yeah, it's a very fine line, I would say, but I love that entrepreneurial side 100%.
Yeah, I was going to ask a very similar question too, because I know you're very technical, and I feel like a lot of times when you're starting a business, you kind of have to shift gears between marketing, sales, business development. Now tax season is here, you got to figure that out. And so I was wanting to know too, how do you make I'm sorry, my dog's having a dream. How do you keep that balance to where you keep your true passion at being technical, but also kind of managing a lot of the day-to-day business stuff and growing with that?
Yeah, no, this is a great question as well. And we always laugh because whenever I make a joke, we got, a finance meeting or something like that, or I'll talk to the engineer, it's always like, kind of me being the engineer, right? I'll just get the engineer and then I'll pop back on the screen. Wearing different hats is so important. That it's just, pivoting in a business. In terms of structure, last year was very all over the place. We were super busy. We still are now, but there was not a lot of structure. So at the start of the year, we put in sales and pipeline sessions. We put in marketing sessions. We put in finance sessions where we would make sure we only focus on those things to get done. And that's been so key throughout the year, is that we have our software that we track all of our pipeline and sales, and we only focus on that in that session. Obviously, we can pivot throughout the week and pick up things that need to be done, but that time is dedicated for that specific thing. So that's been really key throughout this year, is having those dedicated sessions. Even though we have a finance meeting and it's still me and Tanesh, right? We have a marketing meeting and it's still me and Tanesh. So it does make us laugh, but it's still good separating them out and focusing on that one thing. But yeah.
Yeah, you're not alone there. So Alton and I, we're both at Vonahigh Security. So starting out the company, it was very much like that for us as well. It was like, okay, sales and marketing meeting, and it's him and I, and then we have a meeting where we talk about finance, and it's just him and I. So I can definitely relate there.
Yeah, 100%. And I end up building, all the decks and the pitch decks and the sort of marketing collateral. And then I will go off and do an investigation and then come back and fill out, invoices and, but what's amazing is it's such good fun. It's such good fun playing a different role in those different hats, because you get a viewpoint from every role in the business. But I think what's also key is hiring people. That is so key. And we've had it in the past where we've had people come on, and again, where we're trying to pivot in terms of how we keep them on and pay. And again, that's always in the back of our mind. Okay, we need to hit this number to, but even if we're losing out on potential profit, but we have somebody doing something that could generate X, Y, Z. That's super key to have those people within the business, for scalability, right? It's having those people, around you, and people that support, the culture you have, the business culture, and making sure you work together, right, in a way that is comfortable for the whole organization, that will allow you to excel.
Yeah. So this is a question that has to do more about somewhat of your social life, but you're so young and having your own business. I know firsthand how much time and effort that takes, right? Like I'm doing 14, 16-hour days sometimes. Not that I'm complaining, Alton, but it's a lot of work, and you do it because it's your own baby, and it's like you want to see it grow, and that you're the only one that's going to do it, right? Like it's all on you. So, so for being so young, I mean, you're 17, like other 17-year-olds your age are probably out partying. So what's that like? Do you have kind of friends that are also techie? I mean, what's your idea of fun?
Yeah. It's a great question. I can relate to the hours per week. I could end up quite easily doing 80 to 100 hours a week, easily. It's, it just happens, right? As you said, it's a baby and you want to see it grow, and if it needs X, Y, Z, then you're going to do it, right? There's no two ways about it. So, that's just my mindset. And, I would say a lot of my friends are older than me. I've just got on a lot better with older people. Obviously while I was in school, I had friends, but even when I was in school, I couldn't stand people just because of how childish and pathetic, if I'm being brutally honest. I couldn't stand people, and it was very frustrating. And that was while I was in school. Now I look back and sometimes I feel sorry for the people that behaved the way they did, because I'm thinking, where are you going to get in life with that? That's not, so I've never really, I've got select friends. I think you only need a few friends that are the right people. So I've got select friends, my in my age bracket, if you like, that aren't techie, right? But a lot of the people I speak to and connect with, even Newman, right? So Newman's a couple of years older than me. Amazing young entrepreneur again, and we connect really well, and it's just that mindset and that mentally we want to do this and we want to achieve kind of thing, and obviously it's nice Newman's a techie as well, so connecting with people that are older than me is usually what it's about, and I don't have an issue with that. And when it comes to Tanesh, and that's what I really love about our relationship, is he doesn't see it as that it's a 40 5-odd-year-old and a 17-year-old. He sees it as we're both equal, and we have a laugh all the time. We get along. It's really nice to remain on that sort of that same level with somebody, and then to have that same respect for you as you do for them. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely relate with that. I mean, not telling you guys how old I am, but even when I was working, I was always labeled as like the intern, and I'm like, no, I work here full time. So yeah, I get that a lot too. And a lot of my friends and mentors are also much older too, but it's nice. I feel like, when I started working, I started to realize that age doesn't really matter, because it's more about that emotional intelligence. And I think emotional intelligence is different for people, but, age has nothing to do with it. Like for you, for example, I mean, I think you have a lot of emotional intelligence for someone at your age. You sound like you could pass as a 35-year-old if I was just talking to you on the phone,
Yep. And also got to say, it's really nice to hear that you're embracing networking. I got to tell you, when I started pen testing, and when I was, 18, 19 years old, 20, I was just focused on being very technical. And so when I went on site, I was just all about just getting the work done. Didn't really try to embrace a relationship with the client. And, because I just didn't really see it as very valuable until I got a little bit older. And I was like, well, when I started my company, I really started to realize that, having...
You're like, I should have been nicer to people.
Yeah, you start thinking about previous clients. You're like, man, I wish I could reach out to them, but they probably won't remember me, right? Because I was just the guy in the conference room hacking. I didn't really get to ask them, how was your day? How was your week? What do you guys do? How long you been with the company? So it's really nice to hear that you're embracing that, because, like you said, the universe really works in the way it's supposed to. And so down the road, it's so interesting how like a person that you never thought would hit you up with, all of a sudden they need you really badly in like yesterday. So that's really cool.
And that's, that's the way it's been. A lot of our business, funny enough, one of our clients now, we built a relationship with them, I want to say 1.5 years ago. They knew we're a startup. They knew sort of what we were doing and the idea. And, 1.5 years later, we've just landed a fairly large deal with this client, right? And obviously the deal's always the nice, but it's also a nice feeling that, you planted a seed 1.5 years ago that even when we start our calls, right, with people in the States, we always say, oh, how's it over there? We talk about the COVID restrictions, and we end up spending 10, 15 minutes just having a catch up, right? And yes, it sort of detracts 10, 15 minutes to your call. And, people always say shorter meetings, better, to the point, whatever. But when you're starting out and you're building these partnerships, it's so key to, if you have to extend those meetings to build that relationship. And you're human. Everybody's human at the end of the day. You're not just somebody that's, working in an office. And I think that's what COVID's really helped out with, in a way that, people have actually understood that we're all just people doing our daily thing, right? And we need to, understand each other a bit better. So, yeah, the relationship, the relationships when you creating them is so important.
Yeah, I think one of the best pieces of advice that I ever got, and that I could probably ever give, is the fact that when you start a company and when you're building something new, it's always important to give back. No matter how busy the schedule is, no matter what you have on your plate, if you have to disregard 20 minutes from one, plan to jump on to help somebody out, to give something back instead. That'd be my biggest piece of advice for anybody starting out a career. But with that same line, Vincent, knowing there's going to be kids who watch this. I mean, we have a kid that comes into the Discord that's like 11 years old. So if you were to give your 11-year-old self a piece of advice that would help him today, what would it be?
Use frustration and people telling you no use that to drive you and use it as motivation to prove them wrong. That has been the number one thing that I've stuck with. I always embrace, that no, you can't do this. Even back down, diving, when I used to learn new dives, no, you're not ready for that yet, or you're not, and then, school, you can't do this, you can't do engineering, you can't, it was constant, right? But it's learning not to just think, oh, okay, I'm not good enough at this. If you have that passion and you have that ambition to be your future self and who you want to be, then you've got to learn to use that frustration that you're taking from, onboarding from those no's, and using that as your motivation to think, no, I'm gonna prove you wrong. And that has been something that, as I said, has stuck with me. Every call I have, for example, with the investors, you hear a lot of no's, right? Yeah. But it's just like, no, I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm going to be bigger than you at some point. So it's just that, to just keep going. You can't let somebody just, say no to you if they don't know who you are, they don't know your dreams, they don't know your ambitions. And that give back piece is so important for me as well. You mentioned, and with DCC, Jenny, we're onboarded as part of the Kickstart program here in the UK, and that's effectively giving back to young individuals that are on, universal credit, and that because of COVID, it's hard for them to find a job. So we've got those people on board, and we bring them on, and I'm training and spending time with them, building those relationships and people skills. And then, as well as, I won't go into too much detail about this at the moment. It's a whole new session in itself, but we created, me and Tinesh created a company last year called Cyber Inspire. So another one of the cyber brand. And that's really looking at creating a cybersecurity program available for young people between, at any age that they can start, but bridging that gap between people sub 18 effectively, bridging that gap between industry. You'll find a lot of apprenticeships, a lot of jobs will require 5 years experience and minimum age of 18. It's like, where do you find that, right? And they don't teach it in school. They don't teach cybersecurity in school, at least over here. Uni, again, it's out of date. A lot of it is just they're trying to keep up with it, right? It's like a hamster on a spinning wheel. So we're trying to create a program that's dynamic, that changes, but gives young learners the ability to, log onto a platform and have a program that aligns with their school terms, for example, detailed down to that, and they do different things in cybersecurity, and they learn, and we have companies that sponsor it, and they go off and do placements there, So it's really that give back piece when it comes to cyber. I'm really all about that, and the charity work around that 100%.
Yeah, it's super important. I think in order to keep the industry going and moving in a direction that I think we all want to go in, it requires giving back sometimes and sacrifice. And what's funny is, the same people who tell you no and slam doors in your faces, they don't change as they get older, and they don't change the more time they're in the industry. They're still the same people that want to slam doors. And that's part of the thing I have to remember is when I'm dealing with people in the industry is that, sometimes I don't always pick up someone's personality or the way they're communicating. And so I just have to let it go and keep moving. Because, I'm sure Bill Gates had tons of people slam doors in his faces before Microsoft became, what it is today. So those things are going to come along. Anybody listening right now that has a question, feel free to put it in the chat box and I'll make sure Vincent gets it. Just to let you know, Vincent, that I told you before, the podcast is being recorded. It'll be uploaded to TechStrong TV, and they'll be broadcasting it 3 days a week. Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, I believe, are the correct days, spread out through their Digital Anarchist show. So you can download there. I don't have any more questions. I'm glad to see you, Vincent. I'm glad to see you're doing well. Tell your family I said hello. Your dad is super cool. Tell him he still owes me an ice cream too.
Yes, I was about to say we still owe you an ice cream.
Anybody else have anything for Vincent?
Yeah, I got one last question for Vincent. What are some milestones you want to hit 10 years from now?
10 years from now, wow. So I guess it starts with the short term. I want to hit the investment goal and scale our company. That's number one. That's always in my head. I want to scale that company and make the certain products for the different industries as well as individuals, and really build that out and focus on that. 10 years as well, I'm looking at, again, building on that give back program and how to innovate that. As well as some fairly cool stuff to do with drones and all sorts of crazy stuff that I've got planned for the future. But just trying to focus, one thing at a time. I always say one day at a time, right? Tomorrow's never guaranteed. So just get today as well as you can, and then on to the next. So you've got to think long term, 100%. But one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Very cool. Anybody else? Ryan, you have anything else?
I have a question for all of the hosts, actually. Like, everyone here is super intelligent. You, Mike, Alton, a lot of you. What is it about the school system that, like, none of us enjoyed school? Like, they all thought we were going to be failures or whatever. Look at you, Vincent. You're 17. You're absolutely killing it, man. What's the shortcomings in the education system, do you reckon?
I think that it's pigeonholing. I think it's becoming more of a business than something to guide and help an individual. So what I mean by that is that they want to, it's like a conveyor belt. They bring 30 students in, or however big the class is. They sit them all, teach them everything at the same time, at the same level, sit the same exams, and that's it, and then get them out. The ones that fall behind, we don't care kind of thing. And it's that pigeonholing people into that generalization of that business model. Now, at my school, there were amazing people and amazing teachers that did support me, and their backgrounds were, they had a lot of life experience and come from a lot of different places, and they were awesome. They supported me. But more often than not, I wasn't supported. And again, that just becomes, that was because I was different. I didn't fit into that block of 30. So I would say that's the biggest loophole at the minute, is that it's becoming more of a business rather than support for each individual.
Yeah, I think in the US, the biggest downfall is right along that same lines. But I think in the US, the school system is so focused on teaching to that median IQ level, and may come off bad or may sound bad, but the average IQ level in a lot of states in the US is not as high as it probably should be. So if you're in that school and you're being taught at a median level IQ, the people who may be a little bit advanced or maybe a little bit slower are getting left behind and lost. And I think that's exactly what you're seeing over there.
Yeah. And people shoot up at different times, right? There was people that at school that were way cleverer than me, right? They were up here. And there were people also down here. But people, what they didn't understand as well is people shoot at different times. They excel at different periods in their lives. And that's really, really important for them to understand. But it was an interesting, for me at school. But I think that would be the biggest problem with the school system at the moment. It's just too much of a, in and out job effectively. Yeah.
Cool. Well, I don't have anything else. Alton, Tremi, anybody? Is that it? All right. Well, Vincent, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and feel free to drop into the Discord and jump onto the podcast anytime you want. We have them every Saturday at 4 p.m. Central Standard Time, which is, I believe, is 9 p.m. UK time. Yeah, I believe it's 9 a.m. Australian time. Is that right, Ryan?
It's 7 a.m., man.
7 a.m. Okay. Yeah. So feel free to stop by anytime. I'm sure I'll be speaking to you within the next week or so. And the drone stuff, when you start working on drone stuff, let me know, because I'm still interested in doing some stuff with that.
Got some interesting stuff planned with that. Some defense companies over here. So I'll definitely keep you posted. But thank you very much for having me. It's been awesome to have a chat and understand all of your views and opinions. No, it's been really good. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming.
Awesome. Thanks for coming, Vincent.
We appreciate it.
All right,
Thank
guys.
you.
Alden, thanks for co-hosting tonight. I really appreciate that. Hope you enjoyed it and hope you'll come back again and co-host. The goal is to bring as many people into the fold, and we can all share in the co-hosting and hosting, because this is more of like a community type effort. I don't want this to be the Mike Jones podcast show. So anyways, y'all have a good weekend. I will be talking to you guys throughout next week on Discord. If anybody needs a Discord link, let me know. I'll make sure it gets to who it needs to go to. And that's it. See you guys next weekend.
Awesome.
Thank you
have
very
a good
much.
one, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond. CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and techstrong.tv.
All right, next up we have our Something Old segment with from the recent Predict 2021 Virtual Summit, Alex Riebert, who's the co-founder and developer of at For All Secure. He talks about increasing DevSecOps maturity level in 2021. Fuzzing is a big part of that presentation, and it's a great one, so let's give it a listen.
Hi everyone, I'm Alex Riebert. I'm one of the co-founders of a startup named For Secure, and I'm super excited to be here today to talk about DevSecOps. So first things first, I know how it is to be following those conference talks. It's easy to get distracted by a Slack DM or whatever it is that you use. So if you want to follow along the slides, you can go to this link. And where you'll find all of my slides. So if you get distracted, you can catch up, or if you want to see what's next, you can move forward. All right, with that, the talk is going to be divided in 3 parts. And in the first one, I'm going to talk about kind of the background of DevSecOps. It's a word that's being thrown around quite a lot, but I kind of wanted to understand it better, kind of hopefully get some insight about it. That way. Then we'll talk about some activities that as security professionals we can take that I think can be very beneficial kind of in the context of DevSecOps. And then I want to do a deep dive on one of those techniques, which is fuzzing. And I'm going to introduce it later if you're not sure what fuzzing is. All right, so I'm going to start with kind of a confession. I didn't really like the term DevSecOps. I didn't get it. I thought it was kind of like a fad. I thought it was a way for security vendors to insert themselves in the middle of the DevOps tent and cash in on it. Disclaimer, I am now one of those vendors trying to sell you DevSecOps tools. So, take what I'm saying with a grain of salt with that context. But I've kind of made a bit 180 on how I view DevSecOps. And I'm going to start this talk with something maybe controversial. I believe that embracing DevSecOps give companies a competitive advantage. And those that don't adopt it are going to be eventually overtaken by a challenger that can move faster. And I want to take a little bit of time to explain why and how I reached that conclusion. And the first part is security is outnumbered. It's really hard for security engineers to keep up with the volume of code and changes going on in a company. James Wickett mentioned a ratio of 1 InfoSec person per 10 ops people per 10 developers in large companies, 1 to 100. That's not a good ratio. InfoSec are very understaffed in a lot of companies. And it's not really because people are not willing to invest in those teams. It's just really, really hard to invest and recruit talent. And in a survey released by Intel in 2017, 82% of the respondents mentioned they had trouble hiring security people. And even worse, 71% mentioned that because they don't have enough people to help with security, they could kind of correlate that with harm, meaning that they got hacked because they were not defending enough. Due to being overwhelmed, security teams often default to saying no. And I'm sure you or people you know have directly experienced this. Because on my side, I can't tell you the amount of times I hear the story of an overzealous security team kind of putting blockers in people's way. And it sounds bad, but I can't blame the security teams either, because if I was the one security engineer responsible for 100 developers pushing code multiple times a day, I'd be like, slow down, I'm drowning, I can't keep up. And the consequences of this attitude of saying no is that the security people start to get ignored. They get bypassed because developers and other organizations want to actually get stuff done. They can't have security in the way all the time. And that's the thing, the business requires change, and it requires change as much, if not more, as it requires security. And I say this as someone that cares a lot about security, because without change, your business will wither. Your business will be overtaken by a startup that's capable of evolving to the new realities of your market, right? Because the world is evolving around us, especially nowadays, and you have to keep up with it. And for that, you have to change. And so I went back a bit, and I tried to learn about the origins of DevOps. Where did it come from? What problem was it trying to solve, and how did they solve it? And I found this talk by John Allspo and Paul Hammond, and they described how they were doing multiple deploys a day at Flickr back in 2009. This was not something that was very common at the time. And they explained that they achieved this by improving the relationship between developers and operation folks. And this was before the term DevOps was created. Nobody had heard of DevOps before this talk. And they didn't ever use the term DevOps in that talk either. And so if you've not seen it, I'd really recommend going back and watching that talk to kind of understand what DevOps is. And what's really interesting about this talk in my mind is the way they describe the relationship between ops and dev, and how thin it used to be, right? They talk about this stereotypical ops person that was saying no to change all the time because change is what caused outages, and the responsibility of ops people was to keep the website up and running. And in fact, you can replace kind of ops by security in the talk, and it'll be a surprisingly accurate description of the challenges we face today in InfoSec. And the solutions they describe and the problems and solutions they describe are very accurate. And while the tools don't directly apply, the cultural solutions are very relevant. And so our main goal as InfoSec should be to enable change. And nowadays, change often comes in the form of software. Obviously at tech companies, but more and more at other companies that increasingly rely on software as a core part of their business. And this is where software delivery comes in. And so I kind of researched how software delivery performance happens in high-performing teams. And this book, Accelerate, is it's one of the best books I've ever read. And they did a ton of research in our industry about what makes a software team and a tech organization high performance. And what they found is that there were key performance indicators that led to being good at delivering software. And the first one is how quickly can you go from kind of the idea to delivering that idea to the customers. The second one is how often you make changes. The third one is when you make mistakes, how often you recover from them. And the last one is how often you make mistakes. And so if those are the metrics that leads to high performance in tech organization, our goal as security professionals is to add security while improving those indicators, or at least not damaging them. And so in order for the business to succeed, we need to allow change, and we need to allow for change as often as it needs to happen at the speed of DevOps, and do so with security in mind. And this is really what DevSecOps is all about. And this is where my 180 came from. I now see DevSecOps as this requirement to enable security in high performance organization. And if you go back to the talk I referenced earlier, they talk about how DevOps, and I think this applies to DevSecOps too, the solutions to it and what enabled them to give that performance was a mix of culture and tools. And in this talk, even though culture is as important, or if not more important, I'm going to focus on the tools part. And if you want to learn more about the culture, again, refer back to that talk, because all of the solutions apply to our problem as well. If you're kind of new to the DevSecOps thing, there's a lot of material online that you can find. One example that I really like is comes from Google, which mentions how you can involve security more as part of the development process at every stage. How you can do testing for security as part of your builds. How you can give example of good code that's secure that developers can inspire themselves from. And what's really cool about what they describe too is that they have measurements that can help you know if you're on track or not, and see what you're doing. All right, so I hope I convinced you of the kind of importance of DevSecOps, and now I'd like to talk about some of the practices we can put in place that I think can really help. And one thing that's important to keep in mind is because we are outnumbered, because security professionals are outnumbered, so we have to be very thoughtful about where we focus our energy. We have to do a lot with few resources, and I kind of think that we have to focus on high leverage activities, just to the fact that we have too much to do. And I think we can achieve leverage with two things. And the first thing is we're going to get leverage through safety by default. So I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like I'm playing a game of whack-a-mole. We're seeing the same bugs over and over again. SQL injections, buffer overflow, use after phrase. So while we don't have enough security folks, those folks are spending all of their time handling the same issue over and over again. It's like we're stuck in the mud and we can't make progress. And I think we can do better. And one way we can do better is with better tools. I think the root cause of the vulnerabilities that we see all the time would have an outsized impact. It would allow us to move forward and tackle other issues. And then we can build those tools in a way that prevents our users and developers that we're supposed to help, prevent them from shooting themselves in the foot, just because we make it safe for them by default. And one fascinating piece of data, I think, came from Microsoft in 2019. And they released some data about their patches. And they mentioned that 70% of the security patches at Microsoft are addressing memory safety issues. Memory safety issues are one of the worst kind of issues you can have, in a sense that it's usually exploitable. And so what if switching language can remove 70% of the vulnerabilities that we encounter? And kind of Microsoft got to the same conclusion and starting exploring safer alternatives. And Rust is a great example of one safe language that's been getting a lot of traction. And I know if I was in the room with you all, I'm sure I'd see eyes rolling. Like, here we go, another Rust evangelical. And I get it. You work with legacy code. It's not practical to have someone tell you, use a safer language, rewrite everything in Rust. That's just going to slow down your business for months or years to come, and that's not allowing change. But I think what we can do as a security person in a company is we have the opportunity to impact the directions of new projects. So if someone in your organization is considering starting something new and they're thinking about using C or C++ or any kind of memory unsafe language, you have an opportunity to kind of guide them to a safer alternative and make them think really, really hard about whether that's actually what they want. The other thing we can do is build safer APIs. And I have one of the best example of that on the slide. And that's about SQL injections and SQL libraries. And so there's two examples on the slide. One is kind of the old way of doing things, how you would do a SQL query in code. And you can see that the SQL query and the user data in the user and password variables are kind of mixed up, because what the interface expects is a string. And so you mix the control data and the user data, and that leads to SQL injections. In the second case, the SQL query and the user data are clearly separate. The SQL query is the first argument, and then you have the user data as other arguments. And the library is responsible for doing all the sanitation of the user data. And this means you don't get SQL queries anymore. Good APIs should prevent the first case from compiling or running. It should not even be an option. Like, developers will make mistakes. I make mistakes all the time. It's really hard to keep all of the security details in your mind as you write code and never make a mistake. And so we can help people here. We can design APIs that are the easy thing to do will also be the safe thing to do. And if they want to make something unsafe, they will kind of have to go out of their way to make it happen. And I think this will help a lot, because I think a lot of mistakes are avoidable. All right, the second way we can get leverage is through automation. And that's a huge thing in DevOps and DevSecOps. And I want to take a step back and then talk about that tweet I saw recently. And this tweet is about a surgeon that was about to do a surgery on a patient. And what they do before each surgery is they have something like that they call a timeout, where they go through a checklist of things, kind of making sure that they are about to do the right thing for the patient they have. And in this case, they had two patients with the same name at the hospital. And it happens that they had brought the wrong one to the operating room. But because of the timeout, the checklist they went through, they identified the issue and preventing something really bad from happening. And the power of checklist cannot be overstated. It is used in other industry where safety is paramount. Right? We've seen this example in a clinical setting. I know it's also used in aerospace by pilots. And there's a lot of studies showing that even though it seems trivial to go through this checklist, like how can you forget, how can you get the wrong patient? Right? That seems crazy, but it demonstrably decreases the rate of failure. And surgical checklists have been called the biggest clinical invention in 30 years. I'm sure there's some disagreement on that, but to give you an idea of the impact it can have. And while this is not a security book, I would recommend reading it because this book talks about avoiding avoidable failures. And this is what DevSecOps is about in my mind, right? We come up with a checklist, a security checklist, and then we automate it. And that way we can run it on every code change without having a person doing it manually. And what's really cool about automation, right? It encodes expert knowledge and it makes it widely available. And not only does it make it available, it makes it available quickly, which allows those tools to be used in delivery pipelines. And that's so powerful. It enables us from repeating mistakes from the past. right? And it frees us security folks and enable us to focus on the next thing to solve. And there's some tools that I usually recommend. If you don't have them in your pipeline, I would encourage kind of looking into them. The first one is software component analysis. And that's kind of looking at your software stack, your dependencies. So for instance, if you have Nginx in your stack in a container, tools like Snyk will scan it. And if there's a CV recently on Nginx that you haven't seen, it'll let you know about it before you push to production. The second category of tool is static analysis, and it helps you detect mistakes that have led to vulnerabilities in the past. So for instance, LGTM.com does data flow tracking and will detect things like injections, like common injections, SQL injections, use after phrase, that are fairly common, and static analysis has become pretty good at finding those. Other tools like Guardrails does static analysis as well, and things like detecting pushing of like secrets in your code. So if you push your AWS secret key, this will prevent you from going forward. And the last category of tool is fuzzing. And fuzzing will help you find unknown vulnerabilities in your code. And that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of this talk. So let's start by talking about what fuzzing is. And fuzzing is so simple, you'll probably think it's dumb. And what fuzzing does is it throws random inputs at the program under test, and it does so really quickly. And that's it. That just does, random input, send it to the software, and do it repeatedly. But it turns out that even though it's simplistic, with a simple trick, fuzzing can often generate valid and complex inputs from nothing. And this is a really cool image of what fuzzing was able to create with no prior knowledge. And so in this experiment, the author ran a fuzzer against a JPEG parser, and the fuzzer had no knowledge of the file format, and, the specification, or even have access to any kind of image before it started. And yet, over time, he was able to develop valid JPEG out of nothing. And those are what you see here. And if you think, maybe this is academic, who cares about generating JPEG? All of the big tech companies are doing fuzzing. And one of the public projects around it is called OSS First from Google. And they are running tens of thousands of CPU cores all the time on open source software that everyone is relying on. And so this was from 2018, and they had found 9,000 bugs. I think there are 25,000 bugs now. And what's cool about it is that all of the devices that you use today, your laptop, your phone, they are safer because of this project, because fuzzing has found bugs, and those bugs were fixed. And this is all using the simple technique that we just described. So let's talk about why it works. And kind of the key to the power of fuzzing is that it has an element of feedback. It has a feedback mechanism that relies on code coverage. So instead of having to create a complex input, like a JPEG image, all at once, it can flip a few bits and then see that it went a little bit further. It explored a new part of the code because maybe you got the header of the image right. And so the fuzzing is then able to create complex input over time by flipping a few bits at a time and knowing it's on the right track. And many small improvements lead to structured inputs from nothing. This is kind of how life works. There's mutation, there's selection, and then you have evolution, right? And because of this evolutionary algorithm, fuzzing learns. Fuzzing gets better at testing your software over time. And that knowledge gets encoded in test cases. Those inputs are like an automatically generated regression test suite. And you can reuse it every time you change your code to make sure you didn't break something. And what that allows is that developers don't have to spend as much time writing test examples anymore. It's not only a security product, but it's also, in my mind, a developer productivity product. And then to give you an example, this is what a traditional unit test would look like for a function that returns the longest common prefix of 2 strings. And so, it takes 2 strings, and what the developer is going to do is going to think really hard about examples that are interesting, that maybe edge cases, and then make sure that the output matches what the expectation of the developer is. So the common prefix of 2 empty strings should be the empty string. What our first test would look like instead, or in addition to, it's a little bit different. Instead of coming up with examples manually, the developer kind of specifies the type of inputs it needs. And in this case, it's going to ask for 2 strings, S1 and S2, and it's going to feed those inputs into the function, the test. And then you have an output called P. And now we have to think about, we can really compare the output against like a specific examples, because the input could be anything. So we have to think really hard about what it means for the output to be correct or to be safe. And in this case, what it means to be correct is, a common prefix should be the prefix of those 2 inputs. And this is what the first property is checking. But that's not enough, because the empty string would always satisfy this condition. So there needs to be more. And what the definition of this function is that it should return the longest common prefix. And so we can encode kind of the longest part of this definition by saying that if we extend the prefix, then it won't be a prefix anymore. And this is what the second property is checking. And what's powerful about this is that you write those tests once, like unit test, and then you can fuzz forever. You can fuzz and test every time that you change the implementation. And as long as the interface doesn't change, your fuzz test is going to remain valid. And so let's look a little bit what that would look like in CI, because this is a DevSecOps talk after all. And so imagine you have a branch, a new feature branch, and you push your change and your pipelines starts to run. You have the build, you have the unit test, you have the integration test. It's not in the slides, but you might have other security checks, right, that we talked about, static analysis, component analysis. But let's focus specifically on the fuzzing. And so if you have fuzzing in your pipeline, instead of the unit testing and the integration testing, you would add the fuzz testing. And here, as part of this pipeline on the branch, you would use that test suite that was generated by fuzzing automatically. You would pull it from your fuzzing platform that you can see at the bottom, and run all of the test case against the change and make sure that it works. And if it does, then you can merge it. You can deploy your tank or whatever it is you do once you merge a feature branch. And then the difference now is that you kick off a new run of fuzzing asynchronously. Fuzzing can take hours to days. So it's not something you want blocking your pipeline. So you do it asynchronously in the background. And the fuzzing is going to use the test cases that exist already from the previous one, let's say, and is going to add to it. So if you added a new feature, this is where fuzzing will start exploring it, creating test cases for it over time. And if any bugs is found during that stage, all of the fuzzing platform have some kind of background, some asynchronous notification mechanism. So if it finds a bug, it's going to create a nice report around the bug and post it on Slack or Jira or whatever you use. And so that's how you would integrate fuzzing in your pipeline. And that's it for the talk. Thank you so much for coming. Again, I'm Alex Rebert from For Secure, and I really hope you enjoyed the talk, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the Thursday edition of the headlines for you. First up on DevOps.com is the latest in Don McVitie's series on DevOps and languages. In this installment, Don looks at network operations and the evolution of communication in the space. First, it was all about command lines and GUIs, which were great, but not widely embraced by NetOps engineers. Then came DevOps and configuration as code. Today, that nexus of networking and DevOps is managed via command lines still and APIs, which means Python and shell scripting are still the go-to languages in network operations. There are many changes occurring in the NetOps space, including a growing call for applications and appliances that report into the tools that provide automation and a larger picture GUI. Meanwhile, DevOps is getting folded into DevOps proper, and in many organizations, using infrastructure as code, or GitOps, is being deployed and managed like any other part of the lifecycle. Yes, networking is still very much an important element in IT, and some may even argue it is the most important element, for without the network, applications can't run and stuff can't get done. That's why knowing the languages that rule the network operations space is integral. Also on DevOps.com is an article that looks at the state of DevOps automation, according to a recent report by Transposit. It takes a look at the need for DevOps automation as it relates to downtime, or rather minimizing downtime. In the race to accelerate digital transformation initiatives, organizations are encountering more incidents, more downtime, and longer resolution times. In fact, 90.4% of organizations saw an increase in incidents since the pandemic began. That's according to the report. This article delves into some of the findings of the report, including the state of remote work as it relates to incident response processes, the increased demand for SREs, and how automation is narrowing the resolution time gap. It's a bit of an eye-opener and sheds light on how organizations have really been faring during the pandemic as it relates to incident resolution. As much as we believe our work hasn't been impacted by having to collaborate via Slack and Zoom, the fact is there are areas that have been impacted, and rather dramatically. Incident resolution is one. This article also focuses on the growing popularity of the SRE role and the role automation can play in handling incident response. It's a great article worth checking out. In news, a survey by GearSet, which provides a CI/CD platform for Salesforce developers, finds just under half of respondents now release software at least multiple times a week, with another 29% releasing software weekly or bi-weekly. More than half of respondents also said they can deploy software in less than an hour. Those results suggest the level of DevOps maturity among developers building applications on top of the Salesforce software as a service platform is increasing and rapidly. In the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, many organizations embraced SaaS platforms to accelerate their digital business transformation initiatives rather than building entire applications from scratch. The biggest benefit cited by survey respondents was an improvement to application quality at 77%, followed by increased productivity at 69%, and enhanced collaboration at 46%. Other benefits cited included reduced complexity thanks to automation, increased agility, more reliable releases, and time and cost savings. Over on Container Journal, we have an article that looks at chaos engineering for stateful Kubernetes. Stateful Kubernetes is getting market traction. According to a CNCF survey, 55% of respondents use stateful applications in containers in production, while another 12 are evaluating them and 11% plan to use them in the next 12 months. But it's not perfect, especially when it comes to storage. Chaos engineering increasingly is being used to test environments to understand whether an organization truly has a production-grade Kubernetes deployment. Testing using chaos engineering monitors and logs how a system reacts to failures and does so randomly. Since you don't know what the break will be next, it mimics the real-life scenarios and prepares you for anything. Applying chaos engineering will dramatically increase the variety of test scenarios and decrease the potential for encountering unexpected unknown risks. And in Kubernetes, that's a good thing. Also, Esri announced that it plans to make available an instance of its Geospatial Information System, also known as GIS, that can be deployed on Kubernetes clusters. As Kubernetes is more widely deployed in the enterprise, the number of organizations looking to deploy Esri's ArcGIS as a set of microservices running alongside other applications in a Kubernetes environment is steadily increasing. Over time, that architecture will make it easier for Esri to slipstream additional innovations into the platform as they are developed. For developers looking to embed location-based services into their applications, Esri is making available a JavaScript API and a design system to access 2D and 3D data. That capability makes it easier for developers to leverage the power of client devices to process 2D and 3D data locally to improve the overall application experience. Geospatial platforms have a significant role to play within the context of digital business transformation initiatives. Location plays a critical role in enabling organizations to know such things as how to optimize the supply chain, for example. The challenge now is how to best go about making GIS available to any user on demand. All right, over on Security Boulevard, our legal guru, Mark Rash, looks at the topic of hacking and whether it had a hand in rigging one high school's election of homecoming queen. High crimes indeed. Here's the deal. An assistant principal in the Escambia County School District in Florida used her access to school district computers not only to monitor the activities and grades of her high school-aged daughter, but also ultimately to allow her daughter to rig the election for homecoming queen. The daughter used the access to cast 117 additional votes for herself, triggering warnings in the cloud-based election software when all of the votes came from the same IP address. Oops. Mom and daughter were criminally charged with 1 count each of offenses against users of computers, computer systems, computer networks, and electronic devices, which is a third-degree felony, unlawful use of a two-way communications device, which is also a third-degree felony, criminal use of personally identifiable information, another third-degree felony, and conspiracy to commit these offenses, which is a first-degree misdemeanor. An open and shut case, right? No, not so fast. Besides the fact that we are talking about Florida, where pretty much anything goes, it seems, and the wording in the Florida computer crime statute opens up a lot of doors in terms of the way two-way communication and unauthorized access are considered. But really, it's not just happening in Florida. There is a case pending in the Supreme Court that rivals the Beauty Queen case. This one involving a Georgia police officer who used his access to the NCIC database for personal financial gain. So I guess we will have to wait and see whether this Beauty Queen is headed for the big house. And we have an article that looks at mitigating threats at the application layer. Traditionally, security systems and cybersecurity efforts focused on infrastructure and often worked in silos separate from application developers. This approach often left applications vulnerable and susceptible to attack, and cybercriminals are taking advantage, using the application layer as a favored attack vector. Now, more than 80% of attacks come through the app layer. That signals a need for secure coding practices around the application layer, with vulnerabilities continuously remediated or mitigated during the development process and before deployment. This article looks at how an attack on the application layer works and what organizations should look for to protect the application layer against being the focus of an attack. All right, those are the headlines for today. Please check back with me on Monday when I will have a fresh new batch for you. Until then, have a great weekend and please stay safe.
Disruption is occurring across every aspect of IT. Open source, cloud services, DevOps, and cloud-native software architectures are democratizing IT and radically transforming how business is done. The old ways of creating software and doing IT are being replaced with agile, flexible, faster, and cheaper methods, benefiting vendors and users alike. Accelerated Strategies Group is out to democratize access of industry expertise and knowledge. We use our expertise and experience to offer insightful, intelligent, useful information in a variety of formats relevant to the IT community, digital events, videos, reports, assessments, workshops, and implementation projects with tech vendors, IT organizations, and business leaders. We widely and openly share our work products, often for free. Analyst reports these days aren't worth more than a graph or chart that tells a story or illustrates a market trend. We work with developers, DevOps teams, cloud architects, security engineers, and transformation leaders most every day, creating and implementing transformational strategies and technologies. We're not just thinkers, we're also doers.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon. I'm the Chief Content Officer at Media Ops, and I am very, very excited to be having a conversation with three very, very smart people from the DevOps Institute ambassadors. We have Faisal Mohammed, Niladri Chowdhury, and Don White. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very, very excited to have a conversation with you all about the new assessment of DevOps capabilities. But first, I wonder if we can start by having you guys introduce yourselves. Please tell us your name, your title, your company, and what you think we all should know about you.
Sure. I'll start first. Charlene, is it okay?
Yep, that's perfect.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening in. First of all, thank you for having me here. It's a tremendous honor to speak today. My name is Faisal. I'm with Sapiens Consulting. I'm the principal consultant at Sapiens Consulting, which is a consultancy and training firm that is headquartered in Singapore, but we deliver our services regionally in Southeast Asia and in Asia per se. We've been in business since 2008, and our core expertise is actually in the area of service management, governance, risk, compliance, security management, and of course, in the last 5 or 6 years, natural evolution of DevOps. And I'm proud and happy to be here. I'm a DevOps Institute ambassador. I am leading the practice when it comes to DevOps for Sapiens Consulting.
All right, great. Thank you, Faisal. Niladri, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks, Charlene. I'm Niladri Chowdhury, CEO of Excellentro, India and Singapore. I'm also the chief organizer for the largest DevOps event that happens out of Asia, and called the DevOps India Summit. And quite excited to be part of this panel because the ANOC, the assessment, DevOps assessment capability is going to be a great one, and we'll further talk about it.
All right, great, great. Thank you, Niladri. And Don, please tell us about yourself.
Well, I'm honored to be in the presence of some pretty brilliant folks that have been in the DevOps community for a long time. I really appreciate Charlene, you inviting me. I come into DevOps from a 15-year career in the software quality assurance space, and have started with extreme programming and evolved into the lean agile space, and then eventually got into DevOps, and worked with many small startups, got them transitioned into lean agile ways of working, extreme programming ways of working, and that led me into coaching and being a DevOps dojo sensei for the Fortune 1 company in the world. That catapulted me launching my business, Agility Science. And that's where I do consulting and coaching for people throughout the world, quite frankly, but mostly United States based.
All right, great. Such an honor to have all three of you on the panel with me today. I love the breadth of experience and depth of experience that you all have, and each one of you brings something different to the table. So I do appreciate all three of you being here. Want to dive right into the assessment of DevOps capabilities tool, I guess, for lack of a better word. It's an assessment tool that the DevOps Institute has recently released, and it is now available for organizations to use it to basically assess their DevOps capabilities. It's one of those titles that needs no explanation, basically. But I think it's a great tool, and I think it's going to be very well received in the market. But I do want to talk a little bit about the background of it. So Faisal, maybe we can start with you. What are some of the challenges that you've seen in assessing DevOps capabilities in the enterprise? It seems to be obviously there is a need for this assessment tool. So what are you seeing?
For me, an assessment, any assessment worth its salt would need to have a good sample size. I think that's essential. You need to have a really good sample size and not just depend on the responses of a select few stakeholders that may misrepresent the actual conditions, if you like, that the organization is actually at, right? So what I do like about the ADOC assessment tool was that it allows for you to scale up the assessment. Mm-hmm. It allows hundreds of people to participate in this exercise. If you do not have such a tool available, what happens is that this will be largely a manual face-to-face process, mm-hmm. right? And when it comes to a manual face-to-face process of getting assessments, getting people to chime in on their views, chime in on their feedback, essentially what you will get is tyranny of the loudest, right? The person with the loudest voice will be heard, and then you get the masses that just shrink into the background. Right? Just disappear into the background. With this assessment tool, it allows people to, in some ways, some anonymity, and they're braver to give their true assessment of where they are in terms of DevOps capabilities. I think that's the really cool part about the ADOC tool.
All right, Niladri, what about you? What challenges have you seen with assessing DevOps capabilities in the enterprise? Beyond what Faisal noted with the having enough people to do a good sample. What are you seeing?
So a couple of points. One point is, if you look at the assessment, who is doing what is the point. So there are multiple organizations or consultants who goes and does assessment. And one of the challenges which I see is that many of them thinks in terms of maturity. And like what I have discussed with John Willis and some of the people who have started the momentum of this, I mean, how can you have a maturity of an outcome? It's a continuous improvement process. So we have to look at it from that point of view. Not that this 25 points have been ticked, so we are done, we don't have to do any more. Right. I mean, however good we are, we can still improve. So that's the first thing. And the second point, which I also see, is that the senior top people in the organization, they have, as people mentions, that they have a rosier picture of what is actually happening. And I have seen that. And when you go to any of the conferences, even in DevOps Enterprise Summit when I have been, when you see them on the podium, the top management talking on the podium, I call it, it's not that they are not doing good work. They are definitely doing good work, but it's a more sanitized version of what is actually happening. And when you talk to their team members during the breakfast and the lunch, you get to know a lot of the other challenges which comes up. So as Faisal said, one of the very important aspect is to get the right information. So one is the sample size. The other is, I would call it the psychological safety. The people should be able to come out and say what they really feel and not always say everything is nice. Now getting that right picture is very important, because ultimately we all have to understand that we are doing it for the improvement.
That's yeah, it's very well said. Very well said. Thank you, Niladri. What about you, Don? What are you seeing? Because obviously you are working with so many different companies in so many different areas. I imagine you've seen these challenges kind of run the gamut. So what are you what are you seeing out there?
Everything that Niladri and Faisal said is spot on. The one thing that I would like to mention is what to assess. Our assessment tool is so comprehensive and all informed by all the expertise, and knowing what to assess is a huge part of it, but it's really important to get a true good assessment of the whole area. The psychological safety is absolutely spot on. That people need to be able to be true and honest about what's going on, because you're absolutely right, Niladri. Niladri, the starting point, you can always improve. It's all about that continuous improvement journey, and but knowing where you're at is critical. And and most people try to think of the technical stuff. There's so much people. The people part is the biggest part. And being able to assess the people part, because culture is my big thing. Culture is my huge thing, because if you don't have the right culture, that mindset will not take root, and it won't grow, it won't blossom, and you can't grow it. You got to get that culture right. The people part is the critical component. So that's what I love about this assessment. It digs into that. It's not just all the technological know-how. It's the people pieces.
I love that.
And that's spot on. If I just may add on a little bit and piggyback on what Don said, I fully agree with you. The culture is the most important ingredient necessary for any movement to take place, right? Any maturing, any improvement, it has to be the right culture. And the thing about DevOps is the organization is so big, so diverse, right? That DevOps may mean different things to different people.
Mm-hmm.
You ask a group of person and they say, oh, we've got this set of tools, we are already DevOps. And you ask another set of person and say, look, our processes are really lean, I think we're DevOps. And so, people do not have a holistic, a complete view of what DevOps is. That's fine. They come in from different perspectives. And where an assessment comes in is it binds everything together. And it gives the true capabilities of what an organization is really capable of, right? From all aspects. And that's really important.
I mean, I learned some things just by taking the assessment of some things that I wasn't even aware of, practices and things of that nature. And, quite frankly, we'll take it next year and we'll learn more, because DevOps is continuously evolving, right? That's the big thing, especially from the technological perspective, but the people pieces, that's the huge thing, the mindset and where you're at from psychological safety, those are the huge pieces.
That's a really, really interesting point, because you think about an assessment. A lot of times companies will take an assessment and it's kind of, in their mind, it's kind of a one and done thing, right? And it's kind of the same with DevOps. You never really, to your point, you guys, you never really achieve DevOps maturity because the industry is changing so much. So, with that in mind, though, I mean, a company will take an assessment, they have the information, how do they use that information? And is it something that they treat as maybe, say, a living document that is constantly updated and improved upon? Niladri, I'd like to start with you on this question, because I think it's very, very important that organizations understand exactly, you know, what we're talking about when you're talking about this assessment tool in DevOps in general.
Absolutely. Well, very, very important point, because that also has a lot of impact on what we get as the data. The point here is we have to be very, very clear as a consultant when we are going with that ad hoc, is that this is not a tool to fire your people. This is not a tool to evaluate your people whether they are doing something good or bad. It is about how to make them more efficient, effective, and better. It is about achieving the organization's goal, what needs to be done. And that is definitely a very important aspect that I feel. Because if there is that fear, if there is that psychological safety is not there, and people think that, oh, at the end of this, they are going to, my management will look at it and see that whether Niladri has done better or Faisal has done better and give a promotion or a hike to Faisal and not to Niladri, then Niladri is not going to deliver, give the right information. Then the whole purpose is lost. So we have to be very, very categorical in stating as a consultant when we go that this is for the improvement journey and not to punish someone.
Couldn't agree more with that.
Go ahead. Yeah. So Don, do you have do you have maybe some thoughts on how organizations can use the assessment information after it's completed? I mean, we've made it clear that that organizations really need to consider this as kind of an ongoing thing, and I think it's super important that organizations do understand that. But maybe after the first assessment, what can they do with that information?
Well, the big thing is getting everybody having a collective understanding of what your current state is. And this is just one current state tool to get everybody collectively understood on that. Understanding your value streams and all that, those are all current state tools, but it's a starting point to help you figure out a roadmap to move forward. It's your starting point, and you look, and as a consultant, we can guide that because we know kind of the sequential order in which you want to attack these things, right? And we can help them prioritize their roadmap and their backlog of how they want to proceed, is how I view it.
Faisal, any thoughts on that?
Yep. Assessments, Niladri's right, Don's absolutely right as well. Assessments shouldn't be used for the wrong purposes. Mm-hmm. It should be guided by the real desire to improve, to move to the next level. That's the first. The second thing is that an assessment shouldn't be a one-time exercise. Look, I'm at that age where I'm doing health screening every few years. I really am. And every health screening, I get a snapshot of where I'm really at in terms of my health. And then I figure out where are the areas I need to improve upon. Where are the areas I need to watch out. I need to look at, just little bits of maybe change certain lifestyle habits so that I get the benefits of the health assessment results, right? And it's not a one-time exercise. I need to do a checkpoint assessment at some point in time in the future to determine whether what I'm doing is yielding the right results. Mm-hmm. So it should be an organized periodic set of assessments with predetermined, agreed plans to move from one state to a future desired state. And then those assessments take place over and over again, heading towards that general direction of improvement. Right? So it's one thing we need to debunk is that we do it once, then we'll figure out what to do, and then that's it. No, we need to constantly evaluate. We need to constantly assess ourselves in regards to our capabilities.
So it's not just about understanding or taking this assessment and understanding where you are, though, but you also have to have kind of that guidance, if you will, from folks who are experienced in the field. It's one thing for you to, Faisal, if you went to the doctor and you got the test done and they explained to you exactly what the results were, but if you went out and did all the testing yourself, you'd look at all these numbers and say, I have no idea what this means. So
I would not only have no idea, I'll probably be alarmed, I'll be looking at it. I should be dead by now, right? I'm looking at all these test results. But you do need that expertise to help break these pieces of information down for you, calm you down and say, look, these are the steps that you need to take. Right? There are a lot of things that you can do. There's a lot of things that you should do, right? But these are the things that you should focus on immediately in that journey, right? There's an order, as what Dawn said. There's a sequence. There's a realistic sequence which you can undertake, right, to gradually improve and hit towards the general direction of excellence.
Exactly.
If I may add, Shalin, so this is a tool which is helping us in moving to improve the way of working.
Mm-hmm.
And taking what Faisal said, that it's not a one-time activity. So we have to look at that evolutionary process of improvement. So you look at an assessment, you find the weaknesses in the 5 dimensions, then you decide, okay, let's look at some of the value streams where the weakness is more, decide on what you need to do, whether you need training, whether you need automation, whether you need whatever you change in the process, you do it, you take it forward, you go for another set of assessment. And you keep improving on your journey. Because today what is important to understand is we have to be adapting to the changes that is coming and more to come.
What I would like to
help you in that.
What I would also like to point out is you also need to keep the outcomes. Why are you doing all of this in the first place? Make sure that that is what you're driving all of this toward. The other thing I wanted to point out is there's the enterprise assessment, and then you have, I think, a team assessment. And so you use the enterprise to kind of get a holistic picture of it. And then once you kind of figure out where you're at holistically, you can figure out where within the organization you want to do it. And then you can assess those areas, and then you continue to assess those areas as you're continuing that journey. And it's a continuous process. And Faisal, I love your metaphor with the health. I think that really resonates well, because it's really what it's very similar to that. It's we assess all the different metrics in our body. We'll just look at an organization as an organism, right? An organism that has health concerns, and we need to tweak that with continuously assessing it and coming up with a roadmap and a plan, and then executing on it, and then testing our hypotheses that we're moving toward our outcomes that we're trying to achieve.
Absolutely, and it's not it should not be a project. It should be a program.
Yes.
Right? It should not be a one-time effort. It should be a program effort. Weight management, health management is lifetime. It should be that way, and organizations should embrace that.
And the wider it's within the organization, the better, because the folks that, if you're just doing it with partial part of the organization, well, those people that are going through the transformation are not working in a vacuum. They're working within an organization that needs to kind of be on the same page, because they need to interact and collaborate with one another. If they're not on the same page and want to keep the old ways of working, and they're not open to being able to collaborate and work with these people that are trying to do more DevOps stuff, they're going to have limited success. So the broader the understanding of this journey is, the more successful it will be.
That's
Agreed.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And Don, just to kind of expand a little bit on that, and the need for having somebody who's kind of an experienced person who's been in the business for a while to kind of help them through the assessments. I would imagine that it not only kind of helps them understand where they are, but also kind of help them build a roadmap for where they need to go, and also show them the areas where they're in need of most improvement. And from a culture perspective, I imagine that is super important for organizations.
Absolutely. Yeah. Being able to prioritize your plan of attack and know where you really need to focus your energies, but being able to assess your actions is just as important. Because you have a hypothesis that you're doing these things are going to move you closer to your goal. But after you do those things, you want to validate your hypothesis by assessing.
Right. All right. And offering up areas where maybe the organization hadn't thought they would not have thought on their own. So interesting stuff. All right. Hey guys, I would love to have this conversation for hours, and I know we could, but we are running up against our time. But I do want to thank Faisal, Niladri, and Don for such a great conversation. I wish you guys the best of luck with ADOC. I think it's going to be a great success, and you guys are awesome. You're so well versed in the DevOps space, and you really know your stuff. So considering the fact that you guys were involved in creating it, I know the industry is definitely going to get a lot of value out of ADOC. So thank you again, and thanks so much for getting on the Zoom with me and talking about it and about the market in general. So thanks again. It's great to see you guys.
Thank you. Pleasure meeting you too.
All right, everybody, please stick around. We've got lots more coming up, so stay tuned. Hey everybody, happy Thursday. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I'm here now with the Thursday edition of the Webinars Preview. As always, I tell you about some of the webinars that we have coming up on DevOps, Container Journal, and Security Boulevard. Here are 3 that are coming up very soon in the hopes that you'll be able to join us for them. The first one is called Automate AppSec and CI/CD with SCA and DAST, happening Monday, April 12th at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by WhiteSource. DevOps and application security don't always mix. So how can organizations keep up with the speed of DevOps without having to leave application security behind? This webinar takes a look at some of the current challenges and pitfalls with application security management today, some of the best practices for infusing automated continuous security into your DevOps pipeline, and the best application security tools to develop quickly and securely. That's going to be a great webinar. The second one is called the Top 5 Must-Haves for Day 2 DevOps. It is happening Tuesday, April 13th at 11 a.m. Eastern on DevOps.com. This one is sponsored by Red Hat Marketplace. And while microservices and CI/CD are increasingly the standard for building modern applications, operationalizing and managing resources for these applications remains a major pain point for DevOps, SRE, and Ops teams. This webinar focuses on those top 5 must-haves for Day 2 DevOps success. And some of the things being discussed include the criticality of app-centric ops, the power of full-stack analysis from the logical to the physical, why DevOps speed requires hands-free optimization, and the business and operational outcomes of continuous performance. Another great webinar there for you. All right, the third one I want to tell you about today is called How to Build Safer Cloud-Native Applications. This one is also happening Tuesday, April 13th. This one is at 3 p.m. Eastern on Security Boulevard, and it is sponsored by Cyril This webinar is definitely a good one. It will dive into some simple design principles that engineering and security teams can use to help keep their cloud-native environment secure and make managing and troubleshooting these applications and services easier. So some of the things to be discussed include why taking an identity-centric approach to secure your cloud-native resources is necessary, the 5 required functions needed to protect resources from malicious access, and tips for evaluating how your organization's security, or tips for evaluating your organization's security architecture. Another good one. All right, that's it for the webinar's preview for today. I'll be back on Monday with a brand spanking new batch. So until then, have a great weekend, and whatever you do, please stay safe. All right, next up, we don't have Al. We have Mitch Ashley in his Analyst Corner segment. He speaks with Jared Johnson, who is the technical evangelist at CData. They talk about the challenges of meeting the data needs applications require to support digital transformation initiatives. It is a great conversation, and we'll get it started right now.
This is Digital Anarchist. I'm joined today by Jared Johnson. Jared is technology evangelist with CData. Jared, good to be talking with you today.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure to be here.
Well, as an old ex-DBA, data is always kind of a passion of mine, interest of mine, so I'm anxious to hear more about CData. Would you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what CData is?
Yeah, sure. So like you introduced me, my name is Jared Johnson. I'm a technology evangelist for CData Software. I'll start with CData. So we call ourselves a leading provider of data connectivity solutions. In short, what that means is we make it easier for every user in an organization to connect to their data, which lets them focus on the job of finding value from that data or building applications on top of that data, instead of having to focus on the integration, instead of tasking IT teams to build connectors or pipes or flows, whatever the case is, in order to work with the data that they need to drive business.
Mm-hmm. You are number 2 on my list of what are the reasons people come to IT when they're building apps, and that is security, data, and other apps. Right? Yeah. So always need data. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself. I'm curious, how did you become a technology evangelist? How did you?
Yeah, so I actually spent 6 years teaching before I got into software. So my education background was in teaching and computer science, and spent 6 years in a classroom teaching math and computer science, and just decided that we needed a change for myself and my family. So I started at CData. I was actually a member of the support team, which meant I was answering emails and helping solve customer problems. And then I moved into engineering and spent some time there. But it really became obvious that there was a need in the company for somebody with a skill set that I had, being able to speak to people, being able to present information, even write technical documents. And so I was pulled into the marketing team, and I've been doing that since 2016 for the company. Mm-hmm. So writing technical documents, giving talks at trade shows when those used to happen, doing webinars.
Right? Hopefully soon.
Yeah.
Interesting. So, you're not the first person I've talked to that's come out of an education background and moved into technology, and in your case, moving into an evangelist role. That whole skill of being able to explain sometimes very complex concepts, sometimes not so complex, but you may not necessarily have the context or the background for a certain thing that you need to learn or understand, or even explain to non-technical folks, right? So great thing to have, especially in the DevRel world that we all live in now, of really focusing on how we work with service and kind of think like a developer, because that's people who are using it, whether they're kind of business developers or people inside IT. Well, let's talk about sort of the data challenges. And I'm curious, maybe you've seen some things over the last kind of year plus two with the acceleration of digital transformation projects. Yeah. It seems that one of the challenges always is data sprawl. It's everywhere, and every application is creating data, consuming data, sometimes creating data exhaust that's unused, or somebody else might be able to use it. It's no small feat just to find where it is, more or less find out how you can get to it and use it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think there have been studies done. I think programmable web is probably the best place to look if you're looking for a list of APIs. And I think that they have 22,000 public APIs listed at this point.
Wow.
So, I mean, and each of those APIs, there's data behind it. So you have that kind of explosion, the API explosion. On top of that, you've got private APIs, and then, databases, data warehouses, these traditional data stores. So data is everywhere. One of the things that we found is that as data explodes, as businesses transform digitally, you get the opportunity to pick the best service for your needs. So, you've picked your CRM application because it meets your needs the best. You've picked your ERP solution because it meets your needs the best. The consequence of that is that your data is now spread everywhere. So your CRM data is somewhere, your ERP data is somewhere, your warehousing data is somewhere else. And so there's this, as you said, this data sprawl where data is everywhere. And what we do is we make it all look the same. So we like to say that CData lets you see the world as a database. So we've created technologies that allow users to connect to their data, no matter where it is, as if they were connecting to a database. And so I'll drop some buzzwords, some acronyms here. So JDBC, ODBC, ADO.NET, these are all database connectivity standards that we produce that now can connect to things that are not databases. And so, what that does is it really democratizes data access. Now anybody can get to data from any of the tools or applications that they're using. So whether you're looking at an IT team or a DBA or something like a citizen analyst or a data scientist, it doesn't matter. As soon as your data looks like a database, anybody can work with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's interesting you say that. Citizen, data scientist, it's not just developers. Of course, developers are very familiar with ODBC and other connectivity layers for data access, which are, fantastic for developers, but you have to have some pretty specific development skills to be able to leverage those things. A lot of this data is sitting on a Dropbox file server, in some cloud application. We sign up for a CRM system. Well, guess what? I need to connect that with my workflow for when an order comes in, and as good as Zapier and things like that are for doing kind of nice integrations for automation, that's not even going to cut close to solving these kind of problems. And you mentioned too, making it look like a database. I'm curious, from my experience, it's how you get to it and making that understandable, but it's also understanding the data and what it means and how it's represented, because customer is not necessarily defined to the attributes similar in a CRM that they might be in an order system. There may be some variations in just the format of how we capture that data.
Yeah. So, what we do is everything that we make sits on top of the API. So your API is going to have endpoints, and those endpoints are going to expose fields for entities. So let's take a customer, for example. When you hit a customer using one of our drivers, hit the customer, well, now it's a table. It was an API endpoint. What we've done is we've kind of tabularized that data model. So now every customer is a row in a database table, and then each of the fields for that customer becomes a column. And then, what we do from there is basically free you to map the data from one system to another as you need in the tool that you're using. So, we don't force a model on you. We don't, we're not trying to create, one universal picture of a customer across your organization. We're going to let your business specialists do that part. We just make it easier to see. And because it looks like a database, the schema, the metadata, however you define it, is really self-describing. If you can talk to a database, you can point your tool. So let's say you're looking at something like Tableau. When you point it to a database, it's going to show you all of the tables that are available, and then all of the columns that are available for each of those tables. Well, we do the same thing, but for something that isn't a database. So it could be a NoSQL store like MongoDB or Couchbase or even Amazon S3. It could be a SaaS application like NetSuite or even Dynamics CRM. So whatever it is, you get that full tabular model where you can see exactly what's there, and then you can decide how best to work with that data.
I mean, think about the advantage of if you don't have necessarily all the programming skills you might want to go get that data, just not having to use an API, but use the driver instead and say, present that to me in a table form that I can compare, how one customer is defining one, just picking that example, to another customer set of attributes and other applications.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's hard enough just defining who is it, what a customer is. I remember those days modeling. But now you can see what the data is without writing a whole bunch of software and translation and or APIs and learning specifics about this particular service or this cloud application or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and that's one of the things that we really offer is we free you from that integration problem. We free your developers, we free up IT resources. So APIs are constantly changing. I don't know if you're familiar with the Facebook API, but I think they give a new version like every 3 minutes. I think it's realistically like every 3 weeks, but it feels like 3 minutes when you're a developer.
I try not to be familiar with the Facebook.
Yeah, which that's fair. But with our drivers, our engineers are the ones that are keeping up with those changes. So, every quarter we release a new product, and that includes all of the API changes that have happened in the backend. So the only thing you have to do is literally install a new driver into your system. There are no changes, no breaking changes to the API. We merge everything as much as we can, and it really, as I said in the beginning, it lets your business experts focus on your business, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious too, are primarily developers that are using CData and the drivers that you have? How many folks maybe from a non-super technical environment, maybe a little technical skills that might use CData?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I think it's a pretty solid blend. So, one customer story might be a mom and pop shop. They want to be able to look at their QuickBooks data in Excel, want to be able to work with it, print it out, edit it even, and update it that way. They don't like the QuickBooks UI. They're familiar with Excel. And so they simply install our Excel add-in, and now they're connecting directly to QuickBooks from Excel with full read and write capabilities. We can get more complicated than that with customer stories. We have one customer who was dealing with that data sprawl, the data silos where their data is everywhere. And they needed a solution that allowed them to replicate all of their data into the data warehouse that they were already using for BI and analytics. And so we have a tool, CData Sync, that allows them to do that. So solving the connectivity problem and solving the replication problem. So they get automated incremental replication of all of their business data into one place for BI and analytics. And then, I touched on this before, but, we solve that BI and analytics problem in other ways. So, you have data scientists that are familiar with, that really love their reporting tools, whether that's Tableau or Power BI or any other tool on the market. They don't want to have to change tools just to be able to connect to the data. And with our connectors, that's exactly what they get to do. They get to stay in the tool that they're already using. But when it comes to developers, this is where we kind of get into our most complex customers. Ultimately, the customer is an organization that's building a data-centric tool or a platform, and their developers, they're the ones responsible for maintaining the connections to data from those tools and platforms. So, you're building the best BI tool on the planet, but if it only connects to SQL Server, is it really the best? So, we've had companies come to us and use our drivers to build products. And what it really frees up there is one-off API integration. So if you're building a tool and you're connecting directly to the API from your tool, integrating against Salesforce looks one way, integrating against NetSuite looks another way, integrating against Google BigQuery looks a completely different way. But as soon as you use our drivers, it all looks the same. If you can develop a tool that can talk to a database, you can develop a tool that can talk to anything.
And one of the situations I've run across several times is through M&A. When you start bringing companies together through acquisitions, and of course, you need information, you need data to operate. I mean, just imagine combining a sales organization across 2 or multiple companies together, and one's in Salesforce and one's in HubSpot and one's in homegrown whatever.
Sure.
And getting that data quickly, you don't want to have to go through a whole conversion and okay, now everybody's in Salesforce or what, pick your tool of choice. Maybe that's where you go, but you may live 6 months, 2 years where you need data out of multiple systems to see your pipeline, see the sales funnel, see what, how we're closing deal and what the conversion rate and all those kind of things for. And tools like CData are extremely valuable in getting to data very quickly. To get value out of that information.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's legitimately our own personal story. So when we first started as a business, we had a homegrown CRM, and then we started incorporating HubSpot. And now, as we grow, as we get bigger, those systems don't work for us anymore. And so now we're using Salesforce, and we're in a place right now where we are concurrently using all three and actually using our own technology internally, to build reports, to do analytics. And then, as part of that process, to migrate data from one system to another. So moving our data from our internal CRM into HubSpot and then into Salesforce. So because the drivers are standard based, because they make things look like a database, it's incredibly empowering for IT teams and DBAs to work with the data and to either consolidate it or migrate it or leave it where it is, but build up connections to it in a way that lets, the other data experts, the C-suite, whoever needs to see the data, see it quickly and easily.
That's a good point. I don't always want to take on the work of combining things, migrating things. If you can leave data in place, that makes sense to do. Boy, what an asset, because now you can get to it, but okay, just manage it the way you were. And it's great that you could relate to that example that I brought up. We didn't coordinate that at all. So I'm curious, how about the security? What comes with data, security is always super important, access control, things like that. Where in the stack does that fall, and how does CData play in that role, those roles?
Yeah, so we will leverage whatever security is available from the API. So, as one example, Salesforce users have different permissions, whether that's permissions to access different entities, permissions to only read entities, to write entities, whatever the case is. So when you connect to Salesforce using any of our connectors, you choose the user that you want to connect through. And then everything that they can do, you can now do through our connector. Anything that they couldn't do before, you can't do. And then we support like the full gamut of authentication protocols. So, if an API supports OAuth, we'll support it. If an API, supports other, authentication schemes, even so like your Microsoft-based products, on-premise, we do NTLM. If you're looking at Kerberos authentication, we can manage single sign-on, just whatever is available there, we allow. And then the protocols that the API uses for security, so SSL, the encryption, all of that is supported as well. So
I think an advantage you have, since you're not pulling the data out of those systems and storing it somewhere else, it's still data that's living there.
Right.
Now, the security systems, the access controls, permissions, policies, et cetera, are still within those applications, however they're managed, either standalone or collectively across those. So you're not having to, devise some new data permission scheme from that, right?
Right.
Got to be a huge plus.
Yeah.
Cool. What do you see as, well, we have some time left here. I'm interested in what you see as sort of the merging applications. We've seen a lot of acceleration with digital transformation.
Yeah.
The digital engagement with customers, automation. So there's many more things happening. And of course, those both need data and create data.
Yeah. So, I think one of the things that we've seen of late is just this migration to the cloud, where everything is in the cloud, your data is in the cloud, you're doing BI in the cloud. So through products like Tableau Online or the Power BI service instead of Power BI Desktop, Google Data Studio, AWS QuickSight, whatever the case is, you're working with data, from a cloud platform now instead of something on-premise. So what we've created is we have a cloud platform that creates a cloud-to-cloud connection. A lot of the tools that exist today, even if you want to go from a cloud platform to a cloud data store, you're still required to put some like a gateway on on premise somewhere. This is the case with a lot of the Power BI connectivity. And why would you go down from the cloud to on-prem back up to the cloud in order to work with your cloud data? And so that's the CData Connect cloud platform. It's what it's called, but it allows, live real-time cloud-to-cloud connectivity. And so, that's one of the kind of the emerging trends that we've seen is people wanting to just do everything in the cloud. And it makes sense. Especially, I think about this past year, right? Everybody's working remote. You don't have, a on-premise server sitting somewhere that can run your platform. You have to move it to the cloud so that everybody that's working from home can access it. And that's just, one example of this cloud migration that we've seen.
Nothing like a pandemic. I say that knowing, the human tragedy side of it, all due respect, but
yes,
to really force some very aggressive changes in our business and how we operate, and some really interesting things. Is there a particular area of, you mentioned cloud and more usage of cloud services? What's sort of the next frontier, if you will, of that CData is tackling, of how to make this data problem easier?
Yeah, so I think we're thinking about that cloud integration problem and trying to look for ways to help that. But an area that we've started pushing into recently is kind of low-code developers. So I mentioned you have your IT teams and your full stack developers that are used to working with data, that are used to writing code. But something else that we've seen crop up is this low-code application development, whether that's a cloud platform or an on-premise platform. And it's great. You can build a workflow or an app using a drag and drop menu. These platforms tend to be intuitive, and now your citizen analysts can build a workflow to combine data to get what they need into their BI tool. The problem that we've seen there is connectivity to data from these platforms. And so that's kind of an area that, that we've been pushing, in an integration kind of marketing side is reaching out and trying to connect with low code and shoring up our integration with these platforms.
Yeah, and by the way, it happens to be an area of research that we're working on with CData, and we'll talk a little bit more about that here coming up in a few weeks. Some really good, interesting findings from that research, and that was really interesting to Accelerated Strategies, the analyst firm that I run, because there is so much interest in low code, no code right now.
Yeah.
And of course, it's so broad of what that means. It can mean like a spreadsheet to somebody. Excel is low code, or platforms. There's a number of platforms for creating applications and accessing data, through a CData kind of combined platform. So it's really interesting to me of kind of who is using low code developers, low code technologies to create applications. And I think the world used to view it, or currently views it as, those are the business users, non-technical. That's certainly a population, but it's more and more coming into IT is what I'm seeing.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, as somebody who was a developer, was a support engineer, it's fascinating for me to get my hands on a low code platform and figure out, what exactly can I do with this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting technology, another way to solve problems, another technology, right? To build applications. How about the mobile side of this? With so many more mobile apps, we're almost in an era, maybe we are in the era of, I'd like fries with that. I'd like a mobile app with that. Or maybe it is mobile first. Does that change the dynamics of some of the data needs or challenges?
So I think once you start looking at mobile applications, you're looking for lightweight applications, right? Phones are impressive now, right? Like I think about the amount of data that I can store on my phone versus the first smartphone that I got, the amount of space that I have for apps. But at the same time, embedding a software library or a driver or whatever the case is into your app, it doesn't always make sense, especially if you're building an app that's supposed to be able to connect to, hundreds of different data sources.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to install, 100 different 7 megabyte drivers with your app? Like, is that really the best way to go? And that's another place where, our cloud platform makes sense. So you can be on your mobile app, you could build an application that connects to a cloud platform that then allows users to connect to data from anywhere. So, using the same technology that we have, it's just consolidated into one single platform. So you hit that platform and now, you can pull in Salesforce data. You could write back to HubSpot. You could, dump, a report as CSV into AWS S3, all through one platform.
And so many of those apps aren't necessarily greenfield apps, right? They're all that data, maybe even the transactions processing, much of it's happening in other apps,
right?
Other cloud locations. So when you're building a mobile app, you're not inventing everything from the bottom up, right? You're leveraging a lot of existing resources, functionality, as well as data. So it seems like no better. What better of a kind of application where making it easier to get to data? Because, mobile developers don't like writing database access code, right? They like building interfaces and doing cool interactions and useful interactions with customers. So the more you can let them focus on that and really create great experiences with that data, it's a win-win for everybody, it seems like.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Well, cool. I really enjoyed talking with you. And where can folks find out about CData? What kinds of abilities do they have to check you out?
Yeah.
Free accounts or, sandboxing or things like that?
Yeah. So cdata.com is our website, and you'll find all the information that you need there. For any of our installable products, we offer 30-day free trials. And they're fully functional trials. We're not rate limiting. We're not doing anything like that. And then with our trials, you get access to our support team, which we've been called world-class. We have testimonials on our website if you really want to dig into those.
Comes from a man who was on the support team. So,
that's right.
No, I'm sure it's really great.
And then, for the cloud platform, I think we offer a 2-week trial. And so you can kind of kick the tires on that as well. And so cdata.com/drivers is where you want to go if you're interested in an installable driver. cdata.com/connect is where you can go if you're interested in that Connect platform, the cloud platform for connectivity. And then, you can find us on LinkedIn. You can find us on Twitter. We're at CData Software. You can find us on Facebook. A lot of our posting there is upcoming events or recent articles or other news announcements. So,
yeah, and I have checked out your drivers, and an analogy like a Swiss Army knife falls apart very quickly because you have so many technologies, so many platforms that you interface with. It's about 50 Swiss Army knives.
Yeah. So I'm just going to plug this. So I think we're 250 plus different data sources across 11 technologies. So somebody out there is doing the math right now in their head. To figure out how many SKUs we're sitting on right now.
That number of permutations. Well, good. It's really been good talking with you. Yeah. And I look forward to having you all on again and talking some more, I think, about the low code, no code space and some of the things that are happening there. So we'll look forward to that.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Mitch. It's been my pleasure.
Great. It's been Jared Johnson, who's technology evangelist with CData.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
All right, rounding out today's TechStrong TV broadcast is The View with Vizard. Mike Vizard speaks with Applitools CEO Gil Seaver. They talk about how AI is shifting application testing left and right. Fascinating conversation. Let's give it a listen.
This is Digital Anarchist. Hey guys, thanks for the throw again. We're here with Gil Siver, who is the CEO for Apple Tools, and they just picked up I guess it's an acquisition by a venture capital firm known as Tomo Bravo. Gil, welcome to the show.
Hi, welcome. Thank you. Glad to be with you here today.
Tomo Bravo owns a lot of companies. So what was the attraction? What's the benefit to end customers? What should people take away from this little deal?
So I also learned about it as we started to explore the opportunities in the market. And Tomo Bravo is mostly known for acquiring big companies, making them bigger, improving their execution, on sales, on growth, on all other aspects. But they've opened a growth fund called the Explore Fund, and that's the fund that invested in Apple Tools that actually invests or acquires smaller companies and helps them grow, utilizing all the resources that Tomo Bravo has with a lot of operational people that are called operational advisors that help those companies in the areas of sales, go-to-market, marketing, finance, etc.
So this is kind of like a loosely affiliated consortium of companies that share knowledge and expertise with each other, but all operate somewhat independently.
Exactly, yes. They're not really connected, but again, the shared knowledge and experience is actually used to kind of like find what are the best practices to grow a company and make it perform better.
Okay. What is going on in the land of testing these days? I mean, we hear a lot about AI and shifting left. So let's start with AI, because I think a lot of people are scratching their heads trying to figure out what is AI going to mean to testing? Are we going to automate every testing function possible? Or are we just kind of taking little bits and pieces and letting algorithms do that? What do you think is going to happen from here on out?
Okay, so I can start maybe from the end. We believe, and that's where we want to take Apple Tools as well, is that eventually the North Star of testing is autonomous testing. And instead of like writing hundreds and thousands of lines of code, you'll be able to say one command, test my app, and that's it. Now, to get there, there are many steps that needs to be taken, and there are many companies in the market. The test automation market is a very fragmented market, and each one of the companies is automating another area of the testing. High level, when you look at automated testing, you have three, I would say, main activities that needs to be done. The first activity is to navigate through the application and all the different paths in the application. Then you need to inject different inputs at each point of the way and look at the results, look at the outcome, make sure that it's good. And I would say these are like the main big tasks that you do for automated testing. Now, many companies try to automate the navigation through the application, and you can do it in many ways. And AI is utilized to do that today by some companies. And what Apple Tools started with was automating the validation. And instead of writing many lines of code to validate, for example, each different field or element on a screen, etc., to do it visually, to do it automatically, without needing to write code. So what we see is this combination of, I would say, codeless components, which again, in order to operate well, utilize different kinds of artificial intelligence. And hopefully, and I think personally that it's going to take around 3 years to get there, certain companies will be able to put all those components together and make a holistic test automation, I would say, product or platform that can practically run without any code.
So if I think that through a little bit, there'll be computer vision algorithms will be used for one part of testing. We might use algorithms for load testing on another part. But what you're saying is all that needs to come together in kind of one single platform so that it flows into my DevOps process. Is that about right?
Yes, I think this is the right thing to do. And this is how it's going to happen. But instead, it's one way to do it is little bits and pieces everywhere, that you automate certain steps and then you still write code in the other steps. The other way to do it is to take certain, I would say, specific use cases and fully automate them. So for example, today Applitools have been able to fully automate codelessly testing what we call visual components. For example, if you're building your AI based on Storybook, in this specific case, we can actually get to the library of all your UI components, validate them, make sure that they're working and looking great. And we do it today without code end to end. But this is a specific case. Another case is when we work with CMS systems like Adobe Experience Manager, we also know how to interface with the Adobe Experience Manager server, take everything that is intended to be uploaded to your website or to your application, validate it automatically, and again, can do it end-to-end without any code. When you're talking about different languages, types of applications, etc., there it's not fully automated, and you start to automate bits and pieces. And I think at the end of the day, the idea is to be able to do that for all kinds of development infrastructure, languages, etc., and all the steps of the way, from the navigation through the application to the data injection and different variants of data along the way, and the validation of the outcome at the end of the process.
What happens to the testers that we have today? Does that role evolve, or does it just fade away over time? Or how do you think we're going to construct the process around testing?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. I think, what we've seen in many cases that, in the engineering world, it's shift left, where we see that more and more of the testing tasks are being done by the developers, by the engineers. That's one part of it. Another thing, which I call it shift right, it's the other way around. The testing can be done now by the business executive. You have a marketer, and now you provide him the tools for just instructing the testing platform to test the things that interest him. And again, for example, he generates content with Adobe Experience Manager. He doesn't program anything. And we provide him the tools to tell how to test the Adobe Experience Manager outcome. And he doesn't need to go through testing or specific QA guys. He can do it. So I would say the application owner and the business owner can also do the test the same way that in R&D, the engineers and developers can do it. So it's spreading the responsibility for testing and the ability to run testing for the people that actually either develop the applications or are responsible for those applications from the business aspect. And again, in areas where testing is required, just being able, I would say, to give the test automation engineers easier tools to write, code more efficiently, to run tests quickly, more efficiently. And another thing that is really important, and people don't see it up front, is to automatically maintain those test scenarios and test frames, because the maintenance is a big part of managing testing today, because applications are constantly evolving. And even when you fully automated certain tests, that's just the beginning, because every change that is being made to the product, to the application, requires a parallel adjustment of the test frameworks, etc. And this is something that, again, autonomous testing and modern testing will be able to provide, making the life of testers easier in a way and allowing them to invest and focus their time on thinking, what do they want to test, instead of like writing the code and the details of what should be tested, etc. So you'll be able to focus more on the high level functionality of the applications that you're interested in, and let all those little details and code and everything that runs behind the scene to be performed automatically by your testing platform.
You touch on a very interesting point, because it's been a long source of frustration. People will build an app, they'll follow the requirement, everything will be tested according to the way they know how to test it, and yet it comes to the end user and the end user still rejects it because there's something that was missing or wasn't described properly, or the end user is the only one that really has the context to understand how the application is supposed to work. So are we going to finally kind of close that gap in a way that makes us all more efficient and maybe happier with the outcome? Because it's been a somewhat frustrating experience for a couple of decades now, right?
Yeah, definitely. You're absolutely right. I mean, and I've experienced that myself in previous companies, where you kind of like design and build tests, all the tests are passing, you're happy, you release the software, and suddenly it doesn't work in the field because the user scenarios are totally different. So one way to cope with that, which we see evolving, is actually, I was talking about artificial intelligence to kind of like find a way to navigate through the application and to determine which paths should be tested. The other approach, and I think those approaches will combine together, is actually to track the user behavior or work with the application, and then from the logs of the user interaction, of thousands and millions of users' interaction, to kind of build what are the real scenarios that customers and users are using, and convert them into test scenarios automatically. So that's one of the ways to actually build tests that are really simulating the real world and the real utilization patterns of the customers. And in this way, we'll be able to make sure that once your application is tested, it's actually going to satisfy the users as well, because it tested the application the way the real users use it. So that's one thing. The other aspect of it relates to visual AI, which is what Amplitude is focusing on, which again, testing the application visually is really the way to mimic the user and the customer and the way he sees the application. So you don't just read the different fields, from the back end of the application. You actually look at the screen, analyze the data there, exactly like the user does. So when you're saying that it's working okay, it's not that the numbers or the different images are there or correct. It's actually the entire vision or visual experience and user experience is actually perfect and exactly as the user would feel it.
So do you think that we'll get higher quality apps the first time more frequently because we are going to be able to capture what that end user is trying to test for or look for, that functionality, and then it becomes this kind of virtuous feedback loop? Is that where we're headed?
Yes, that's where we're headed, and we're headed there in two steps. I think the first time you launch an application is the more difficult task because nobody has used it before, and it may be difficult to kind of predict how it would be used. But once you have an application that is utilized and you can see the usage patterns, etc., the maintenance is becoming easier and simpler. And that would be probably the first thing that would be resolved. Making sure that like the first time you launch an application, it's fully tested. That's the next step. It's a little bit more difficult. But I think what helps us get there is analyzing so many different applications. So when a new application comes, if you can classify it and say, okay, that's an online banking application. So I take all the experience, not from that specific new application, but from hundreds and thousands of different online banking applications that can help us also with AI in general to test it right from the first time it's being launched.
If we take this approach, do you think that the rate at which applications are developed and deployed will increase? Or at least in my experience, a lot of times people skip the testing process because they're running up late against the deadline anyway. And so they basically don't test, and that's how they make their deadline. Or, what do you think the ultimate impact is going to be?
So I think that the impact is going to be that I would say more applications would be fully tested or much better tested without slowing down the software release process. I think in many other aspects of the software lifecycle, everything is automated, it's running really fast. And, we see that with continuous integration, continuous deployment. Some of our customers release 5 times a day, and they want the release process entirely to take not more than 20 minutes. And today it's practically impossible to test that thoroughly within that time frame. So testing is partial, and many bugs or issues escape under the radar. I think that with autonomous testing, it will be able to keep the speed of continuous integration, continuous deployment, but increase the quality significantly, making sure that the user experience would be flawless, as we expect software to work, and do it in the same time frames of all the other, I would say, steps or components of the software release cycle.
Great. Hey, Gil, thanks for being on the show.
No, thank you for having me. I was glad to share what I see in the market in the testing space. And I think it's really exciting because we're at the point that really testing is going to transform and become autonomous testing in a very few years.
See, it's not about shifting left or right. It's just about making testing invisible so that we do it more often, right?
Exactly.
All right, great. Hey, guys, back to you in the studio.
Okay, thank you, Mike.
Hiring great DevOps and cyber talent is a huge challenge for technical teams. Cloud transformation is driving demand higher. You've tried doing it yourself. Job boards, LinkedIn, didn't work. Recruiters are an option, but who do you trust and not waste your time and money? RecruitOps is the new way to source engineering talent. From MediaOps, the people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, and more. We sit right in the middle of the hottest positions in Dev, Sec, and Ops, and the brightest minds in the field. If you're looking for a great position or the talent to fill it, we can help you. Trust us, risk-free.
All right, everybody, that is it for today's TechStrong TV broadcast. I hope everybody enjoyed today's conversations as much as I did. I do enjoy listening to these. There's so many great conversations that we have on this show. We're going to be back on Monday with a brand new broadcast for you. Until then, I hope everybody has a great weekend, and whatever you do, please stay safe.